Welcome to part 1 of the new series, I Signed a Contract with the Evil God. Welcome to a world where darkness reigns and the strong write the rules. In this story, 7 colossal black doors have descended upon the earth, unleashing a tide of disaster from the surface world to the hidden dark realms beneath. Monsters lurking among humans hunt what remains of mankind, while imprisoned gods and mysterious thrones await their next move. Our protagonist doesn't seek the light, he thrives in the shadows, fighting against gods and feeding on the chaos around him. Betrayal is constant, and only the strongest survive. His words echo through this broken world, God will not bless me. Sorry, but your ability. I want it. And I will open the next door to humanity's destruction. If you encounter any issues or have feedback, please let me know in the comments rather than just disliking the video. Your input helps me improve, and I'm here to make sure you have the best experience possible. Enjoy the content.
Chapter 1, Part 1. I would like to remind everyone at the beginning that this book is not a behind-the-scenes story. The protagonist is a growth type, and the supporting characters will not be wise. Everyone has their own preferences for radishes and vegetables. If you don't like this book, I hope you will be merciful when commenting. At this point, thank you all for watching. Name? Fang Yi. Age? 16 years old. How long have you been blind? About 3 years ago. Oh, what caused the blindness? I don't know. I woke up one morning and suddenly couldn't see. Fang Yi said regretfully. There's no reason? The middle-aged doctor looked at the sharp-browed and handsome young man in front of him and frowned. Can you open your eyes? Okay. Fang Yi smiled slightly when he opened his eyes. The doctor who looked up suddenly had his pupils shrink to the size of a needle tip, and the thin medical record paper in his hand suddenly fell to the ground. In the cold, dark pupils of the young man in front of him, astonishingly, there are 2 bloody cross patterns reflected in it. The middle-aged doctor's mouth suddenly curved in an exaggerated arc, reaching to the base of his ears, forming a weird smile. You're here. Looking at the doctor who stood up and knelt in front of him, Fang Ye's eyes moved slightly and narrowed his eyes with satisfaction. Do you know the purpose of my coming? The middle-aged doctor buried his head deeply in his chest and shook his head after hearing this. Get me a blindness diagnosis certificate and a recovery diagnosis certificate. Fang Ye's voice was light. Okay. The doctor's tone was distorted, and he slapped himself expressionlessly. After his mouth returned to normal, he took out his pen and wrote out 2 diagnosis certificates. He raised his hands with a respectful expression. What's your name? Suan. Very good. Write down your contact information. I will contact you if necessary. Fang Yi casually glanced at the contents on the paper, then slowly put on his sunglasses and put the diagnosis certificate into his bag. Suan sat in his doctor's chair in a daze, watching the young man holding a guide stick as he slowly disappeared in front of the consulting room. There were no words for a long time. Doctor. It wasn't until the next patient's hand shook back and forth in front of him that he withdrew his gaze, raised his head, looked at the person in front of him, and showed a mechanical smile. After Fang Yi walked into the elevator holding a guide stick, he heard a commotion and screams of fear coming from outside. As the elevator is located on the 1st floor, the door slowly opens the moment. The strong smell of blood invaded his nostrils. Get out of the way. Don't block the way. There are monsters. The elevator shook and several people rushed in. The elevator that originally contained only Fang Yi suddenly had many more people. A young man rushed forward and frantically pressed the door button. It was a young man with neat short black hair and handsome features who looked to be no more than 15 years old. When the door slowly closed, another ordinary-looking girl wearing black-rimmed glasses pressed the top button, tremblingly. The people in the elevator looked at each other. Dong dong, dong dong. He could even hear the dull heartbeats of everyone in the elevator. This is a standalone hospital, so there are not many people in the hospital. There were only 5 people in the elevator including Fang Yi. In addition to the boy and the girl wearing black-rimmed glasses, there was also a middle-aged uncle and a woman in slightly revealing clothing. Excuse me, what happened outside? Fang Ye's voice was not loud, but it was enough for everyone to hear clearly. I saw it. Dead. All dead. The woman screamed and shrank into the corner of the elevator, with a hint of crying in her voice. She ran over from the scene of the incident and bore the brunt of the impact. Not only did she see stumps and broken arms lying on the ground, but she also saw a dead head staring into her eyes in a pool of blood. I just came for a gynecological examination. Why would something like this happen in the hospital in broad daylight? Have you seen the murderer's appearance? The handsome young man grabbed the woman's shoulders eagerly, making the latter tremble again. Don't touch me. Stop screaming, the middle-aged uncle roared through gritted teeth. What if the murderer finds us in the elevator? Although the girl wearing black-rimmed glasses had a trembling voice, she quickly calmed down. I'll call the police first. Boom. A loud noise made several people in the elevator tremble again. The lights above their heads flickered, and the elevator broke down at this moment. Got stuck on the 5th floor. Is this the elevator malfunctioning? The middle-aged man grabbed the handrail in surprise. The small elevator room gave several people a complete sense of security at this moment. At least it's safe here now. If it were a normal elevator malfunction, there would be a scolding. Why is there no signal? It shouldn't be. I just sent a message to my roommate before entering the elevator. The girl with black-rimmed glasses swiped the screen of her phone eagerly. What? The young man was stunned when he heard this and took out his mobile phone. Sure enough, the 3 words, "no signal," on the screen were particularly dazzling. He turned around eagerly and asked the woman, "Did you see the murderer?" What's the use of asking this? I didn't see it, the woman cried. This man is also standing at the door. Why don't you ask him? Only then did everyone notice the young man wearing sunglasses standing in the middle of the elevator. Are you an idiot? Didn't you see that this child is blind and has a guide stick in his hand? The middle-aged man said sadly. He had reached the limit of his patience with this woman. Fang Yi stood there with a calm expression, not moving at all. Silence and dead silence gradually spread in the elevator. Before they knew it, they had been trapped here for an hour. The boy who seemed to be the youngest was the one who adapted the fastest. He was still able to chat in this situation, and he quickly asked everyone's names and the purpose of coming to the hospital. His name is Li Lu, a junior high school student, and he came to the hospital simply to visit his friends. The girl wearing black-rimmed glasses is called Luli, and she is a college student who comes to the psychology department for consultation. The middle-aged uncle's name was Xietianan, and he said he was here for a general gastroenteroscopy. The other woman didn't say her name, and she didn't want to tell everyone what she was here for. She just kept huddled in the corner, shivering. After Fang Yi briefly told a few people his name, he didn't say much more, because anyone with a discerning eye could see it. After chatting for a while, there was still no movement from the outside world. It was as if they were truly trapped in an isolated space. The fear of the unknown is like a heavy boulder, weighing on everyone's hearts. Puff. A melodious fart sound broke the atmosphere in the elevator at an inappropriate time. Several people's eyebrows skipped a beat, and they looked calmly at the source of the fart sound, which was none other than the middle-aged Uncle Xietianan. After such a big murder, no police came after so long? Xietianan was a little embarrassed. I want to go to the toilet. Puff, puff, puff. A stench spread in the elevator. If the first fart was bearable, everyone couldn't stand this series of farts. Even Fang Ye's expression was a little unbearable at this moment. Li Lu pinched his nose and looked strange. Uncle, don't hold me in the elevator. I can't help it. I just drank laxatives to go to the toilet after my gastroscopy, and who knew this would happen to me? Xietianan's face suddenly turned red, and his legs kept rubbing. Lu Li walked forward calmly, lest the uncle really transform into a splatoon. Then get out now. The murderer should have left. After an hour, the woman calmed down and looked disgusted when she smelled the stench of the elevator that lingered for a long time. Just go. Even if the murderer is still there, can I, a grown man, still not be able to fight him? Xietianan's sphincter muscles continued to contract, and he looked embarrassed. At this hour, he had reached the limit of his patience. This is simply the longest hour in his life. He has worked hard to control it, okay? He put his hands between the cracks of the elevator door, trying to force it open. At this moment, a white palm rested on Xietianan's arm with bulging veins, and he turned his head to look in shock. It was actually the blind boy with the weakest sense of existence, Fang Yi. Chapter 1, Part 2. But his next words made Xietianan, a middle-aged man, tense up like he was falling into an ice cave. Don't move, he's right outside the door. Chapter 2, Part 1. Aren't you blind? How do you know? Xietianan retracted his hand as if he was electrocuted. His expression was shocked and angry, but he still lowered his voice subconsciously. The perception of blind people is higher than that of ordinary people. Fang Yi pointed to his eyes, but what he said made everyone in the elevator car feel like they were facing a formidable enemy. It is true that while blind people lose their vision, their hearing and perception are much stronger than those of ordinary people. Then, what should we do? The woman who had been relaxed a lot was frightened. She originally thought that they were lucky enough to escape the massacre in the hospital. Unexpectedly, the murderer is actually hiding outside the elevator door now. This murderer has waited for so long. It can be seen that everyone in the hospital is dead, so he has been waiting outside. Luli was frightened. We can't wait here all the time. Only by letting one person go out first to divert his target in sight can the rest of the people survive. Xietianan was a little crazy now. Then let's take this blind man. He can't run far anyway, and he will die sooner or later. The woman's words made everyone focus on Fang Yi again. Are you crazy? Luli looked in disbelief. Obviously, He didn't expect that this woman would want to abandon this blind boy at this juncture. This is a real human life. No matter what, we have to wait a little longer, and then we can figure out a solution together. What is the difference between doing this and killing someone? Then you go. Why? Hearing the argument between the two, Fang Yi raised the corners of his lips slightly and smiled mockingly.
Can.
Really? The expressions of the woman and Xie Tianan were both overjoyed at this moment. I'll go. The carefree young man Li Lu interrupted the two of them. He squatted down and put his ear against the cold elevator door, quietly sensing the situation outside the door for a while. His struggling expression suddenly became solemn, as if he had made some kind of determination. The person outside the door may not be a person, but an E. With E's speed and strength, even if Fang Yi was used as a bait, the time he could delay would be no more than a breath. Air? The other people frowned when they heard this unknown term. Fang Yi tightened his knuckles on the guide's stick. Perhaps you won't believe it even if you tell me, but in this society, there are countless monsters in human skin, bloodthirsty, and love to kill. They are hiding among humans and waiting for opportunities. It's just that I have never seen expose herself naked in front of the ferryman's eyes. What happened? Lu Li keenly captured the unfamiliar vocabulary in Li Lu's words. What is a ferryman? He is a superpower in this world. He is also a person who secretly protects social security and eliminates evil. Li Lu looked back with a firm expression. Are you a ferryman? Fang Ye's abrupt words shocked Li Lu. I think you, a junior high school student, have watched too many TV series. It's just a murder case, and it involves all these things. As Xie Tianan spoke, a string of stinking farts came out again. Get out of here, the woman screamed, covering her nose with a handkerchief. If we don't get out, he's going to pull him out. Even if I die, I don't want to die in a puddle of shit. Just because there's no signal in the elevator doesn't mean there's no signal elsewhere in the hospital. After I distract the air outside, you should first escape and find a place with a signal, and then notify the police. Li Lu put his hands on the crack of the door, and his seemingly slender body burst out with amazing power. As a creaking sound sounded, several people saw a scene they had never imagined in their lives. A 2-meter-tall, faceless monster with bandages all over his body stood in front of everyone, looking down at everyone in the elevator eerily. On his extremely long jointed limbs, there are at least 7 or 8 heads connected in series, shaking quietly. Everyone in the elevator was dumbfounded. It wasn't until Li Lu's hand lit up a ball of extremely hot flame that everyone realized it. Everything that young man said just now is true. Fang Yi stared deeply at the faceless monster, and before he took a few steps forward, Li Lu's angry shouts mixed with a hint of fear filled the ears of the remaining 4 people. Run away. The woman and Xie Tianan immediately dispersed in the corridor like birds and beasts. Lu Li pulled Fang Yi up and ran after him in the direction of the stairs. But what happened next was something no one expected. The extremely tall, faceless monster actually ignored the flames in Li Lu's hands, moved its long legs, and the sharp joints instantly penetrated Xie Tianan's head. The woman, whose name had never been told to anyone, looked at Xie Tianan, who had his head penetrated and his body was still twitching uncontrollably. A scream of extreme horror echoed throughout the hospital. Ah! I'm here. Kill me. Seeing the instantaneous death of the ordinary people who were trapped in the elevator just now, Li Lu roared and burst out with unprecedented strength. He clenched his fists and struck with extremely high temperature to the faceless monster. However, it backfired. Looking at the monster who was unharmed, he turned his head sadly, but he was at a loss in his heart. What kind of E is this? Why had I never heard of it, and why were his attacks useless? Is it a mid-war level air? Feeling the shadow of death approaching, Li Lu suddenly dodged the attack from the whizzing knife-like jointed limbs. He shivered as he felt a line of blood instantly appear on his face. The pain made him regain his sense a lot. Li Lu looked at the backs of the other 3 people struggling to escape. A stream of tears fell from his face, but his legs escaped uncontrollably. Seeing Li Lu, who had overtaken her in an instant, the woman was extremely frightened. Aren't you that ferryman? Aren't you trying to protect the safety of ordinary people? You are a superpower, and you left us and ran away. I'm sorry. I don't want to die. I'm just a trainee ferryman and have never had actual combat experience. I'm sorry. Li Lu burst into tears, running fast and roaring at the top of his lungs. This time when I go back to see Uncle Qiao and the others, I will definitely apply to withdraw from the ferryman organization. He doesn't deserve it. He is not worthy to be the ferryman who protects everyone and fights against evil. The woman's curses became weaker and weaker, and when Li Lu turned around again, her headless body fell to the ground in a daze as she kept running. A long limb followed and passed through his heart. You run away. Fang Yi paused and broke away from Lu Li's arm holding him. Now that you are escaping alone, there is still a chance of survival. But, stop it. Fang Yi interrupted what Lu Li wanted to say. escape and call the police. Li turned around and saw the tragic scene behind her and was shocked. The monster's speed was so terrifying that it killed the two people in an instant. She was so frightened that she gritted her teeth and left without looking back. Uproar. Li spit out a mouthful of dark red blood. Tears couldn't stop falling from his cheeks, and he stretched out his hand towards the running figure in front. He doesn't want to die. Chapter 3, Part 1. Fang Yi stood in the corridor, facing the window. The strange eyes under those sunglasses slowly opened, looking at Li leaving the hospital, then turned and walked towards Li. The sequencer's strong physical fitness prevented him from dying immediately after his heart was destroyed. I don't want to die. I don't want to die. I don't want to die. Li roared in his heart and took out his mobile phone tremblingly, with a smile that was uglier than crying. Is there a signal? Li, who was holding the mobile phone, coughed up a mouthful of blood again and raised his eyes with difficulty to look at the blind boy in front of him. What are you going to do now? Fang Yi leaned down. Is it you? Li didn't understand why the blind boy in front of him didn't run away, but came back to ask him this insignificant question. Did he also know that he couldn't escape? I really can't save anyone. Contact Uncle Qiao. Their Wuching home team will definitely eliminate this unknown evil. You abandoned ordinary people. Fang Yi smiled. Are you afraid of death? I. Li choked, comparing himself with everyone in the Wuching home team as a trainee ferryman of the deputy team. He can only control the unskilled, scorching heat, and he can't even defeat the low-level combat air. What are your abilities? I'm just the scorching of sequence number 199. Hearing Fang Ye's question, Li trembled and swiped the phone screen. He was the weakest person in the Wuching team, but as long as he could contact if you go to everyone, it will definitely. Number 199? Fang Yi murmured. Li's pupil shrank suddenly, and the unknown, Yi, was already standing behind Fang Yi, raising his jointed limbs high. Quick, run away. But the next scene. But it plunged him into a whirlpool of fear and unknown. Fang Yi gently raised his hand to signal. The unknown Yi, who was 2 meters tall and covered with bandages, put down his jointed limbs. You. Li was at a loss. He didn't understand what happened. Perhaps, what happened in front of him was beyond his understanding. Fang Yi slowly took off his sunglasses, his strange blood-crossed eyes full of apology. Why? How did you do it? Li's eyes were dull. He didn't feel the fluctuations of the sequencer from this person, but it was unheard of for humans to be able to control the evil. Li, although this is our first meeting, I have known you for a long time. Sorry, I need your ability as my key. Of course, you can also understand that these people all died for you. Fang Yi easily snatched Li's cell phone that was on the address book interface. The latter stared at the young man in front of him, his eyes bloodshot and his voice hoarse. Life was passing quickly. You are a demon. Fang Ye's lips curled up, his eyes pity. Farewell, trainee ferryman, Li. He covered the deadly Li's head with his hand. A strange energy flowed into his body, and a cluster of black flames suddenly appeared on his fingertips. Against the backdrop of the orange light, the halo on the young man's face wavered. Is this the 199th sequence ability, Scorching Heat? Fang Yi stood up expressionlessly and swiped Li's newly unlocked phone. One of the numbers was dialed. After a while, he threw his cell phone next to Li's body and looked up at the monster Li called E. Stab me in the shoulder. Wuching, which is a Class A war zone, actually broke out under our noses, killing 10 people? A bearded man sitting in the back seat of the car was wearing a suit and had a gloomy expression. Has that E cleared up? Without Team Shun, air melts into the shadows. As long as they want to escape, it is difficult to be caught. The young man sitting in the passenger seat turned his head and looked murmured. Team Shun took a deep breath. Did the survivor call the police? There were 2 survivors in the hospital. One called the police, and the other found us directly. Who? He contacted us using Li's mobile phone. Li. I know. Captain Shan interrupted the young man coldly. Where is that standing hospital? It's now blocked. Is there any surveillance footage? No, everything was destroyed. Outside the police station, red and blue lights flashed. People were shouting and crying one after another. What's the reason for this external use? Captain Shun took a deep breath upon seeing this, feeling uneasy. Psycho knife killer. After the car stopped, he pushed open the door and walked straight into the police station. Several police officers quickly stood in front of him and stretched out their hands to stop him. Please show your ID. The policeman took the certificate and his expression changed. Ferryman? Let go. As soon as Team Shun stepped into the interrogation room, he was greeted by a frightened young man. The young man's eyes were closed, his shoulders were wrapped in white gauze, and he was wearing a police uniform jacket. He was holding a glass of hot milk in his hand and shaking. Are you a survivor? Captain Shun's expression softened a little when he saw the guide stick placed on the table What's your name? My name is Fong Yi. Xiaofeng, do you know who the owner of that phone is? Or was it picked up in a panic? I know, his name is Li Lu, and he was trapped in the same elevator with me and 3 other people, but he sacrificed his life to protect ordinary people like us. Fong Yi lowered his head, his voice a little trembling. Captain Shan's expression changed, and he put his hand on Fong Yi's shoulder and softly comforted him. Being able to die protecting you has always been Li Lu's ideal. Fong Yi took a sip of milk, calmed down and spoke again. As a blind person, I can't run very far. When I turned back, Li Lu had already dialed one of the numbers before he died. But the monster is gone. Monster? Captain Shan winked at the young man, and the young man slowly exited the room. How do you know it's a monster? In the elevator, Li Lu said that the person outside the door is Yi, and he is a person with supernatural powers, known as the ferryman. Uncle, are you also a ferryman? Team Shan was stunned for a moment, then nodded. I am. It turns out there really are people with superpowers. Fong Yi kept rubbing the milk cup in his hand, looking a little sad. A lot of people really died, and I smelled a strong smell of blood. Captain Shan sighed and caught a glimpse of the young man who came in again from the corner of his eye. His mouth opened slightly, but he didn't make a sound. Does what he said match that girl? The young man nodded and made a gesture. Totally consistent. Don't worry, you are safe here. Team Shun touched his beard, turned his head and looked back, silently making another gesture. That gesture means, erase his memory. Chapter 4, Part 1. The young man walked up to Fong Yi and was stunned when he saw his sunglasses. Xiaofeng, are you blind? Nonsense, I'm not talking about you, Pansheng. Didn't you see his guide stick? Captain Shun complained angrily. Fong Yi was startled, put down the cup in his hand, took out a blindness diagnosis certificate from his bag and placed it on the table. This is my diagnosis certificate. Are there any questions? It's okay. Just sit down for a while. Pansheng laughed and pulled Team Shun out of the interrogation room with a look of embarrassment on his face. What for? Didn't I ask you to erase the child's memory? The existence of our ferryman is still kept secret for the time being. No, Brother Shin, although my hypnosis can tamper with memory, but one of the conditions is that you have to look into each other's eyes. Pansheng explained with an embarrassed look. What? Why didn't I hear about it? Captain Shun puffed his beard and glared, looking from the window glass to Fong Yi who was sitting indoors. Then his memory cannot be erased? Because I'm not capable enough now. He's the only one who knows about the existence of the ferryman anyway. I just need to sign a confidentiality agreement. Pansheng scratched his head. I know. Captain Shan waved his hand helplessly, opened the door of the interrogation room and sat down opposite Fong Yi. I hope you can keep this matter a secret, because if this kind of existence is known to the public, it will cause panic. I will ask someone to get a confidentiality agreement for you to sign in a while. Of course, we will fully compensate you for your injuries and mental health. Why is it causing panic? Aren't there special beings like you protecting everyone? If it weren't for the ferryman named Li Lu, I would have died a long time ago. You can tell from his voice that he was very young and very brave. Fong Yi lowered his head and rubbed the rim of the cup with his fingers. Thanks. After hearing Fong Yi's evaluation of Li Lu, Team Shun's eyes dimmed. He is the youngest ferryman in our Wuching deputy team. He has a cheerful personality and gets along well with everyone. I have always regarded him as my biological brother. As for causing panic, that's because, facing unknown creatures like air, we are currently unable to detect them and can only wait passively. We have to wait for it to appear before encircling and clearing it. So there are still many uncontrollable factors for us. That's it. Fong Yi pointed his finger. Anyway, after signing the confidentiality agreement, we will send you home. Captain Shun glanced at the clock on the wall. It's not too early now, Pansheng. Bring me the agreement. Oh. Pansheng, who was leaning outside the door, stood up hurriedly. Can I join you? Fong Yi's sudden words made Team Shin almost spit out his tea. He looked at Fong Yi with a strange look on his face, but still patiently explained. Although there are ferrymen who are not sequencers in the Wuching deputy team, they are already quite dangerous for ordinary people, let alone? Captain Shin didn't finish the rest of the words, he sighed. There are many ordinary people who want to seek shelter after being attacked by air, or even go crazy with fear, but they are indeed powerless, which is why erasing memory is important. After a while. Pansheng, why is it so long to get an agreement? Captain Shan stood up and walked to the door impatiently. What if I can feel it? The young man's words made Captain Shan's pupils shrink suddenly and his steps froze in place. Xiaofeng, this joke is not funny. Team Shun came back and patted Fong Yi on the head. You are not a sequencer. Although I could sense that life form before, I didn't know what it was until today when I came into contact with the concept of the ferryman and evil. Fong Yi raised his head. Even with his eyes closed tightly and looking at his tightly pursed lips, Captain Shun felt the complete seriousness from a young man for the first time. Give me a place. Tomorrow, at this time tomorrow, I will write down the evil I feel near my home on a piece of paper and give it to you. Can you write? Captain Shun suddenly realized that he had asked a very stupid question. Perhaps Fang Ye's battle was too serious and frightened him. Or maybe he wanted to try it. Once there are sequencers who can sense evil, then the death rate of ordinary people and ferrymen in Wuching, a Class A war zone where the prison gate stands, will be greatly reduced. This is my business card. You can find me when you come here tomorrow. Until Fang Yi signed the confidentiality agreement and got in the car, Captain Shun still stood there blankly, watching the car leave. Hey, Brother Shun, are you stupid? Pan Cheng stretched out his hand and waved it in front of him. Captain Shun's expression changed, and he walked back to the bureau eagerly. I'm going to report all today's situation to the home team. Don't let anyone disturb me within an hour. Oh, Pan Cheng responded and muttered softly. Why didn't you smoke a cigarette today? Fang Yi fumbled for the key from his pocket and opened the door. The room was dark. Mom is on night shift today. Fang Yi did not take off his sunglasses in a hurry, returned to the bedroom, and felt relieved after locking the door. The intense pain in his shoulder made his lips turn white for a while. Time for painkillers has passed. He suppressed the pain, and his blood-red cross eyes turned indifferently to the shadow behind the curtain. Come out. A 2-meter-tall monster with bandages all over its body emerged from the shadows and instantly occupied Fang Ye's small bedroom. It had an awkward posture and a strange appearance. It was the unknown evil who tortured and killed the people in the hospital during the day and then fled away. His figure gradually shrank and turned into the appearance of a normal person. Surprisingly, it was the ophthalmologist named Suan grown-ups. He knelt down respectfully. Seeing him like this, Fang Yi felt awkward and said, You don't have to kneel down. You did a good job in what I told you today. Suan's body trembled with excitement for a moment and then became calm. Are you sure you haven't been discovered by the ferryman? When I kill people, I always use the body that will not be discovered. Suan grinned and smiled ferociously. Write me any information you can about other similar things near my home. Fang Yi said expressionlessly. Are we finally going to take action against those damned dependents? Yes, I will use the ferryman's hand to partially remove them. A thin layer of cold sweat appeared on Fang Ye's forehead. You can go. I will contact you if anything happens. Yes. When Suan's figure disappeared into the shadows again, Fang Yi panted heavily, tore off the gauze and looked at the wound that was slowly healing, and smiled mockingly. Then he pulled out a black and white photo from the book in the desk drawer. It was a family portrait of a middle-aged couple holding a child. The three of them were smiling brightly and enjoying themselves. It's just that the man's face has been rubbed repeatedly by the fingertips many times, and now it has become blurry and old. Fang Yi fixedly stared at the photo, his eyes extremely cold. Dad, I will definitely find out the truth about your death. Chapter 5, Part 1. The next day, Wuching Central Park. A thin young man with thick dark circles under his eyes held a mobile phone in his hand and pushed open the door of a luxury suite. Various kill reports came from the mobile phone from time to time. He looked at a blond man standing in front of the floor-to-ceiling window, wearing a simple white shirt and trousers, with an elegant and mature temperament. He smiled and said, Uncle Chiao, why did you call me here alone? Do you have a mission? The air was stagnant for a second. Ah Huan, Li Lu died. What? Ah Huan's pupils trembled, and the phone dropped to the ground with a tremble. Fortunately, there was a thick carpet on the ground. Yesterday, he went to a private hospital in Shirqiu district, Wuching, to visit a friend who had suffered a fracture, and there was an evil in the hospital. According to survivors, he died protecting ordinary people. That air hasn't been cleared? Escaped, Deputy Captain Shun Ci said. According to the survivor's description, it is an evil type that has never been seen before, and its strength is about mid-range. Is that so? That kid really can't beat him? Ah Huan lowered his head and his voice was hoarse. The blond man looked at him calmly. The room fell into an eerie silence. When he raised his head again, the young man in front of him had a smile on his face. Li Lu's goal has always been to work hard to become stronger and protect everyone. Now he has fulfilled his dream, which is not a loss. I know you have a good relationship with Li Lu and are childhood friends. The blond man took a deep breath. Don't tell his parents until you get rid of that dammy. Why? Ah Huan was startled. Do you want to tell his parents that the whereabouts of the monster that killed him are still unknown? How can you give an explanation to your uncle and aunt? I know, Uncle Chiao. Ah Huan forced a smile. It wasn't until the young man's lonely back disappeared into the room that the blond man known as Uncle Chiao sat back in the boss chair. The sequencer's hearing, physical strength, endurance, and explosive power are several times that of ordinary people. Listening to the extremely suppressed sobs outside the door, Chiao rubbed his aching temples with his slender fingers and picked up the meeting minutes on the table. A blind boy who can sense evil? He picked up the phone on his desk and dialed a number. Hey, where are you now? Wuching Police Department? Chiao narrowed his eyes. are you going to see the blind boy today? Shinsi on the other end of the phone was stunned. How do you know? I didn't know it before, but now I know it. I'll be there in 10 minutes. Do. Hearing the busy tone on the other end of the phone, Pan Chung, who was leaning against the door, laughed out loud. Captain, you are so short-tongued that no matter what you say, no one can catch you. Okay, now, the captain of our Wuching Ferryman home team is coming. Shinsi glared at Pan Chung fiercely. I didn't do anything wrong. I just wanted to confirm the authenticity of the child's information first. Otherwise, the news will be false and it will be a joke. Pan Chung pouted. Then I'll wait and see what joke is going to happen today. Get lost. Today, Fang Yi wore a soft cotton and linen long-sleeved shirt, sunglasses as usual, and walked into the police station with a guide stick. Maybe it's because Fang Ye's characteristics and temperament are more distinct. Or maybe it's because there are fewer blind people who frequent the police station. The police officers guarding the door glanced at him and let him in. Looking at Fang Yi, who walked in through the door, pulled out a chair and sat across from them, Pan Chung looked surprised. Hello Xiaofeng, we meet again. Good afternoon. Fang Yi sat down and put the guide stick aside. He looked at Xiao sitting in the room. Just as he was about to introduce himself, he saw Xiao raised his palm to signal silence. Pan Chung understood and closed his mouth wisely. Hello. Fang Yi smiled slightly and turned his head towards Xiao as if feeling something. Pan Cheng's eyes widened, and he looked back at Xiao, who was leaning on the chair with a look of astonishment. Uncle Xiao, I didn't say anything. The sound of two people breathing is certainly different from the sound of one person breathing. Why do I feel like my eyes are not as good as yours? Okay, Pan Chung, get out. Shinsi, who came over, picked up Pan Cheng's collar and threw him out of the interrogation room mercilessly. Who is this? You are indeed more perceptive than ordinary blind people. Xiao folded his hands, leaned forward, and glanced at Fang Yi with an inquiring gaze. If Captain Xian hadn't shown me your blindness diagnosis, I would have thought you were just like an ordinary person. I'm not sure about that. Maybe it's due to the environment. Fang Yi shrugged. This is the first time we meet. My name is Qiao. I am the captain of the Wuching Ferryman team. In addition to your keen perception, do you have any other feelings or changes in your body? Fang Ji was stunned. This is currently the most powerful ferryman in Wuching and a core member of that mysterious organization. It must be much more difficult than Captain Shan. Change? I haven't felt it yet. You said that you can sense evil. In that case, the ferryman named Li Lu from the hospital was also with you that day. Logically speaking, you have this ability, so you should be able to avoid it. Recalling what happened yesterday, Fang Yi still had some lingering fear on his face. At that time, 5 of us were trapped in the elevator. I informed everyone that there were monsters guarding outside the elevator, but the situation forced Li Lu to protect us. Make your own bait to lure away the monster. This matter can be verified by another survivor. If you don't believe me, there's nothing you can do about it. Xiao flipped through the conversation records of Lu Li, another survivor on the table, and spoke again. Sorry, I didn't doubt you, nor did I deliberately target you. Because this information is so important to the ferryman, even now, no one has the ability to observe the sequence of evil. I already know from Captain Shun that you want to join the ferryman. Aren't you scared after experiencing that kind of horrific thing personally? You should know how ferocious monsters like E are. I chose to join you because I was afraid. After all, I am the only one who can sense those existences, so from the day I could sense them, I have suffered and suffered every day. It's better to have organized protection than to be alone. Fang Yi breathed a sigh of relief. The sequencers are like beacons in the dark night, and those evils are the swarming sharks, so the ferryman organization exists for this reason. Not only to protect ordinary people, but also to protect yourself. I have another question. Is there any other reason why you want to join us? Zhou's tone was gentle, but unquestionable. I want to make money. What? Xiao froze on the spot, obviously not expecting Fang Ye's reason to be so simple and crude. After my father passed away, my mother and I were the only ones dependent on each other. A year ago, I contracted a strange disease in my eyes and became blind. I can't go back to school to continue studying, and I can't go out to work to help my mother share the pressure. But yesterday, I discovered that I can sense what Captain Shan calls evil. You also compensated me a lot of money for the riot in the hospital yesterday, so I want to join you. But if you can't give me the money, forget it. Fang Yi muttered, getting up and searching for the guide stick. Hey, wait. Shinsi, who was eavesdropping outside, rushed in with a panic look on his face. Where's the note you promised to give me yesterday? At least let us take a look at it first. The money will definitely be given to you. This person will pay for it. He's rich. You don't have to worry. The corner of Qiao's mouth twitched, and he glared at Shinsi. After all, he is the deputy captain, but he is still irritable no matter how he talks or acts. Oh, as long as you have money. Fang Yi smiled shyly and took out a note from his trouser pocket. This word. Xiao raised his eyebrows. The handwriting on the note was neat and neat. It was obviously not written by Feng Yi himself. I asked my friend to write it. Feng Yi said truthfully. Xiaofeng, please go home these days. We will notify you at any time if there is any situation. Good. Pancheng, send Xiao Feng home. Xinci shouted. Pancheng opened the car door and sneakily approached Feng Yi's ear. Xiaofeng, what exactly did you write on that note? It's nothing, just some information that you may be interested in. Feng Yi said casually, by the way, I want to ask you something. What? Pancheng was confused. How much is your monthly salary? Chapter 6, Part 1. Xiao, who was sitting in the police station, and Shan Ci, who was approaching, looked at each other. The information on this looks correct. It's not like it came out of nowhere. There was a hint of unnoticeable excitement in Shan Ci's tone. Are you going to act today? Well, I will ask them to report in real time. Once the information is confirmed, Feng Yi will be protected immediately. Xiao put the note back into his suit jacket pocket with a deep look. It's 8 o'clock in the evening in Wucheng, in the alleys of the old city. Two girls stood side by side. One of the girls lowered her head and swiped her phone screen. She was wearing a complicated black and red gothic dress covered with large lace. Her thin white legs were wrapped with various strap decorations, and a small umbrella of the same color was hanging in her hand. Her long hair flows down her waist like ink, and under her long and thick eyelashes is a pair of cold phoenix eyes. Another girl with short red hair put one hand in her pocket and held a baseball bat in the other, spitting bubble gum in her mouth out of boredom. She was wearing a tight-fitting work vest that exposed her navel on her upper body and a pair of loose camouflage pants on her lower body. She was leaning against the wall covered with small advertisements, kicking the stones under her feet. Why did Xiao suddenly arrange a mission for us? The red-haired girl was very dissatisfied. I don't want to work overtime. I heard that there was a blind boy who said he could sense evil. We are here to confirm this information. What? The red-haired girl's eyes widened. Is he a newly born sequencer? No. The phoenix-eyed girl responded calmly. Then this is nonsense. How could Xiao believe such nonsense? The red-haired girl curled her lips. Just wait. According to what he said, he will pass by on this road every day. All right. They didn't know how long they waited, until under the dim street lights, two men arm in arm appeared at the end of the narrow alley. Little girl, it's not good to run into a place like this. The two looked at each other in disbelief. Could it be that what the blind boy said was true? Hey Lan Yuan, are they them? The red-haired girl looked excited. Wait a minute. The closer the two middle-aged men got closer, the stronger the smell of alcohol they breathed became. Drunk? The moment one of the men rushed towards him, the red-haired girl's figure flashed, and the drunk man jumped away. With a look of disgust on her face, she kicked the drunk man on the back, causing him to fall to his knees in an instant. Looks like a real drunkard. Hey, you kicked my brother? Another man in a brown jacket was holding on to the wall, eyes wide. Stop. The man in the brown jacket rushed over. Lan Yuan's eyes narrowed, and a butterfly knife came out of his hand. It whizzed past the man's face and inserted straight into the wall. The man swallowed hard, and he suddenly sobered up for the most part. Go away. The red-haired girl shouted softly, raising the baseball bat in her hand high. Ah! A scream echoed in the alley. The red-haired girl's baseball bat stopped less than a centimeter away from the person in front of her, and she slowly shook her head while looking at Lan Yuan. Seeing the man in the brown jacket holding his head and squatting on the spot shivering, Lan Yuan sighed and turned around. Let's go, Taro. Go back and report to Qiao. Taro's cell phone rang at this moment. Uncle Qiao, there are only two drunkards here, no? Taro's pupils shrank, and he turned around stiffly. The man who was originally squatting on the spot has now strangled Lan Yuan's neck from behind, his eyes dark. Haha, what can you two do? He laughed softly. His right hand hanging under his sleeve expanded rapidly and broke the fabric. The yellow and black scales spread on his arm, like the shell of a crocodile. The right hand was abnormally large, almost as tall as him. Just from the appearance, it could be seen that it was filled with explosive power. If you dare to move, I will kill her first. The man grinned and spread the bone spurs on his 5 fingers. The drunkard who had been kicked to the ground by Taro from the beginning opened his eyes in confusion. What is this? After saying that, he fainted again. Wow, it seems an incredible person has appeared. Taro sighed. As expected, you can't set the flag first. Hey Uncle Qiao, the information is accurate. I understand. Come here immediately after you complete your mission. Let's have a midnight snack anyway. Hey, I want to have a late-night snack too. The cold light emitted from the mobile phone screen illuminated Lan Yuan's smooth facial lines, and she frowned when she felt the sharp bone spurs that might penetrate her neck at any time. Shut up, the man roared. Kill her, and you won't be able to kill me. Taro put down the baseball bat in his hand, glanced above, and smiled sweetly. Two idiots. He licked his lips and instantly closed his fingers, as if he had foreseen the wonderful scene of the person in front of him having his head explode and his brains flying everywhere. A beautiful sword light lit up in the dark night. The girl with phoenix eyes in his hand opened the small umbrella in her hand. Is this something for defense? The man was confused for a moment. The next second, his vision was spinning. What happened? He stared in confusion and tried to move his eyes. Within his sight, he could only see a pair of leather boots getting bigger and bigger. Immediately, his vision went dark. You're still so violent. Lan Yuan shook his umbrella in disgust. Blood stains intertwined with black and red patterns on the umbrella. Taro on the other side looked at the large blood stains splattered on his body, his face expressionless. Why don't you help me hold on too? Hehe. Lan Yuan. I'll kill you. It belongs to the category of death, and the low-level battle is evil. It has been cleared. The corners of the mouth of a handsome young man who was sheathing his knife twitched slightly, and the body of the middle-aged man at his feet instantly turned into ink-like liquid, seeping into the ground and disappearing. Taro, I didn't say that, so you should hide for a while. You're stupid. Lan, Moo, I want you two brothers and sisters to be dipped in the pig cage together. Taro roared, letting out the roar of a Hadong lion. Lan Yuan looked behind him. Where are the others? Lan Mu shrugged. I'm still busy carrying out my mission. I didn't expect that the information Uncle Qiao gave me is true. What's going on? I'll let you know when we treat you to a late-night snack. Taro rolled his eyes. Just pick any roadside stall. You're so generous. Inside the Wuching police station. After listening to Qiao's words, Shun Ci stood up suddenly. His expression changed, and his body trembled uncontrollably. Is it true? Well, the three misfortunes on the note have all been cleared. Qiao smiled rarely. Holy shit. It wasn't until he heard Xiao's affirmation that Panqing felt a little more confident. Shen, Captain Shen, is that kid serious? The ferryman's first initiative to eliminate E was a great success. Shin Ci closed his eyes, and then every word spoke loudly. Immediately, protect Feng Yi. Chapter 7, Part 1. They've been cleared by the ferrymen. A dark shadow slowly emerged from Feng Ye's bedroom. So fast. Feng Zi moved slightly. It seemed that they had wiped out the three disasters last night. It must be said that the efficiency of these superpowers was still quite high. In just one night, 3 people disappeared quietly in Wuching without causing any public opinion. What do you need me to do next? Suan still half knelt on the ground respectfully. Just like you did before, continue to work in the hospital. Feng Yi turned the pin in his hand and smiled slightly. Good. Etc. Suan paused. I won't have to pretend to be blind from now on. Please help me think about how to avoid being discovered with these eyes. Feng Yi raised his eyebrows. Although these evils are monsters, they have been hiding in human society for many years, so they have more knowledge than a high school student like me. Suan's eyes trembled when he looked at Feng Ye's bloody cross, and he lowered his head. Perhaps, colored contact lenses can cover your eyes. This is the most effective and direct method. Color contact lenses? Feng Yi was stunned. What is that? Those are contact lenses made by humans that can be worn on the eyes. You are not myopic and have no need for this, so it is normal that you don't know. Suan said with difficulty. Oh, get me some pictures when you have time. Feng Ye's expression didn't change. Good. After Suan left, Feng Yi fell on the bed with open arms and stared out the window. In the distance, there is a huge black door that is 100 feet high, surrounded by clouds, and rising from the downtown area. Its existence almost divided the entire city center of Wuching, but the strange thing was that it seemed to have no entity. The bustling crowds under the door and the constant flow of vehicles all passed directly through the door. The two seemed not in the same dimension, just like the day he lost his eyes 3 years ago. At the same time, it was also the night his father died. From the time when he just entered high school and gave a speech as the representative of his grade, he had an accident at home, lost his eyesight, and had no choice but to drop out of school. After the funeral, my mother seemed to have aged 10 years overnight, and the family has exhausted all their savings because of his eyes. To this day, he can still remember those painful days. Countless late-night collapses and countless words as sharp as knives made him understand how cruel this world is, so cruel that it made him want to laugh. He cannot be depressed or give up on himself. He still has important things to do. That night, both the evil and the ferryman were the culprits that caused his father's death and his own blindness. He must kill all those heirs and find the ferryman that night. To this end, he uses whatever means necessary. Even though Li Lu's scorching eyes and that outstretched hand lingered in his mind, he doesn't care. Now that I have this sequence ability called Scorching Heat, I can naturally join the ferryman. Because what he needs to enter is not the secondary team, but the home team. So just being able to sense the gimmick of evil is not enough. Sure enough, God will not save me. Feng Yi murmured. staring at the huge black door above the city, and couldn't help but recall the dream he had every day after losing his sight 3 years ago. 1 year ago, it was his last dream. It was an endless gray world, with only a huge blood moon occupying a corner of the horizon, exuding a cold and dead light, and it was also the only color in the world. It has neither risen nor fallen, and in the center of the scarlet moon, there was a dark shadow, just like a human pupil. Is this my dream? Every time he dreamed, he tried to open his eyes wide, trying to see clearly the shape and content of the shadow, but no matter how hard he rubbed his eyes, he could only see blurry black edges. The high-definition picture quality is very similar to that of old movies, but one day, he actually saw it clearly. It turned out to be an exaggeratedly large and ferocious throne of thorns. Its edges were filled with sharp thorns, casting a thick shadow on the ground. Sitting on the throne is a mysterious woman with a voluptuous figure, her face shrouded in a layer of mist, and only 2 white and delicate slender legs can be seen, with her bare feet touching the thorns intertwined with flesh and blood, bringing a strong visual impact. Who is she? Fang Yi looked up at the mysterious woman on the throne of thorns. He was confused, but he couldn't help but laugh at himself. Anyway, I can still see all this in my dream. The aura emanating from the throne was so cold and gloomy that he couldn't even tell which of the two it came from. I just feel that this dream is clearer and more real than ever before. You are here. This voice seemed to be ringing from his ears, but also seemed to be far away. Is she talking to me? As the dark gray ground squirmed unnaturally, huge white eyeballs opened from under their feet, staring straight at him. Eat him! Eat him! Countless words of gibberish and laughter came from all directions, echoing continuously in the empty gray world. The aloof and mysterious woman, with elegant manners, descended step by step through the void until she stood in front of Fang Yi. Even at such a close distance, Fang Yi still couldn't see her face clearly. Who are you? Why are you in my dream? The woman chuckled and opened her hands, and strange black runes floated from the soles of Fang Yi's feet in circles, like chains crisscrossing him. Those black runes were like red-hot irons, making a stinging sound when they were printed on his skin. Fang Yi gritted his teeth, and the severe pain made his body tremble uncontrollably. Her soft and cold fingertips lifted Fang Yi's chin, slid along the chin to the Adam's apple, and then dropped from the Adam's apple that couldn't stop rolling to the chest. The rules of the world are made by the strong, and the weak only need to abide by them. Are you willing? The woman's words seemed to have some kind of bewitching charm, and his dim eyes were like a fire gradually burning. I'm not willing to give in. Have the gods you called to me day and night ever answered? God won't help me. His eyes were scarlet, and his face was ferocious. Do you want revenge? I think. When the conversation between the two ended, Fang Yi's figure had been completely submerged in the black cocoon formed by runes. I don't know how much time passed. A pale hand suddenly penetrated the black cocoon, and as the young man disappeared, the whole world echoed with murmurs. The contract is completed. That day, Fang Yi woke up in a cold sweat and groped around, but he was still lying on the bed. He thought this was just another bizarre dream. But, the moment he opened his eyes, 2 bloody cross patterns emerged from his eyes. Since then, he has regained his sight. Chapter 8, Part 1. So hot. Fang Yi tossed and turned, covered in sweat. Wrong. He sat up suddenly, picked up his sunglasses and put them on. Sweat rolled down from his forehead. It was already dark outside the window. The first ray of sunlight in the morning had already shone into the bedroom. The indoor temperature was so high at this moment. But he expressionlessly turned his head to the phoenix-eyed girl leaning on the desk. At this moment, she was looking at Fang Yi with interest and playing with his air conditioner remote control. In the living room, a woman who looked to be in her 40s or 50s was standing in the kitchen, busy with today's breakfast. She was Fang Yi's mother. Jingle. She wiped the water stains on her hands, picked up the phone, glanced at the news message popping up at the top of the screen, and her pupil shrank suddenly. Last night, a vicious psychotic knife murder case occurred in a private hospital in Wuchang. 10 people died. The murderer has been arrested. Isn't this the hospital where I went to yesterday? Fang's mother was startled, and her lips couldn't help but tremble. How come this child didn't say anything to her when he came home? Has I gone home? She was shocked. I finished the night shift last night and didn't have time to see if the child was in the room. Her heart seemed to be tightly grasped by a big hand, and she forced herself to calm down while mumbling with trembling hands. Oh no. Fang's mother put her hand on Fang Yi's bedroom door handle. As the door lock turns, click, the door opened. It's just opened from the inside. Mom. Fang Yi looked stunned and immediately closed the door. What's wrong? You kid. You scared me. She touched Fang Yi's face in panic, grabbed his shoulders, and looked left and right. Take a few steps and show me. Raise your hand and show me. Fang Yi reluctantly performed several laps in the living room before sitting back on the sofa. Etc. What's wrong? I just saw the news that the hospital you went to yesterday had a mentally ill person who committed suicide yesterday afternoon. What's going on? You didn't even tell your mother. Fang's mother looked anxious. I forgot. It probably happened after I left. Fang Yi scratched his head. Fang Ma leaned against the wall with relief and bowed her hands. That's great. Our child is really blessed by heaven and earth. God must be looking after us. Mom will go to work soon. The meal has been prepared and is in the kitchen. Okay. Fang Yi smiled, washed up, and returned to the room. The girl held her chin and watched Fang Yi lock the door and couldn't help but say, "It seems that you are quite good at lying." Fang Yi's expression turned cold. Who are you? Do you know this is called breaking into a private home? Also, how did you know my home address? I was sent by Uncle Qiao to protect you. The girl with phoenix eyes had no expression on her face. They asked me to take you to our base after you woke up, but you were too sleepy. What's your name? Just call me Lan Yuan. Lan Yuan responded, then took 2 long steps and stood in front of Fang Yi's bed. Now that you're awake, let's go. Let's go? Let my mother watch me take a strange girl out of the bedroom? Fang Yi's eyes were dark. He got up and fumbled to open the window. Get out? Lan Yuan glanced sideways. Isn't your mother going out soon? Aren't you in a hurry? What if I fall to death? This is the 3rd floor. If you could fall to death, would you still be sent to protect me? Fang Yi sneered. Hey, I'll wait for you downstairs. Lan Yuan clicked his tongue, stepped on the window with 1 foot, and jumped out. Fang Yi was in no hurry to go out. He sat back at the desk and opened the drawer. Inside was a large number of small boxes neatly arranged. This should be the colored contact lenses that Suan was talking about. They are indeed air and very efficient. Fang Yi tore one open and hurriedly put it on. Although it was the first time to wear contact lenses, Fang Yi didn't feel any discomfort. He looked in the mirror and sighed softly as his eyes returned to normal. Half an hour later, there was a rustling sound outside the window. Hey, I've been waiting for you downstairs for half an hour. The girl looked out angrily and saw Fang Yi sitting calmly in the living room, holding a big white steamed bun in his hand. Do you have a way to prove your identity? What if you are E. Lan Yuan stood angrily in front of Fang Yi and grabbed the steamed bun. Didn't I tell you that Uncle Qiao asked me to come? You may also know the existence of Qiao. Fang Yi slowly picked up another steamed bun on the table. Why should I believe you? He just told me yesterday that he would notify me in the next few days, and it has only been a month since then. Night. Until the girl in front of her dialed a phone number. Xiaofeng, her name is Lan Yuan. She was sent here by me. Zhou's voice came from the other side. Oh, I see. So, have you confirmed what's on the note? That's right. After hanging up the phone, Fang Yi spread his hands and said, Of course I need to confirm this matter. After all, my ability seems to be very important to you at the moment. Lan Yuan took back his phone and said nothing more. Now that your identity has been confirmed, let's go. Good. When the two opened the door, a girl with a beautiful face stood in front of the door. She was shocked when she saw a strange girl suddenly appeared next to Fang Yi. Who are you? Upon hearing this, Lan Yuan turned his eyes to one side and did not respond. Shiwei, why are you here? I heard from Aunt that you were at home, so I came to find you. I may not be free today. Fang Yi smiled apologetically. This is my distant cousin who came to see me this time. Distant cousin? The girl was startled. No wonder she had never seen her before. She held Lan Yuan's hand with a smile. Hello, sister. My name is Cheng Shiwei. I am Fang Ye's high school classmate and his childhood sweetheart. Lan Yuan's mouth twitched and he glared at Fang Yi fiercely. It's a pity that he is blind. Otherwise, your gaze will definitely kill him. There are still things to deal with today. Come here quickly. After Lan Yuan said stiffly, he went downstairs alone. My cousin has a bad temper. She just arrived all the way, and my mother asked me to take her to my uncle's house to reminisce about old times. It doesn't matter. I didn't tell you in advance. Cheng Shui waved her hands in a panic. Go ahead. Don't keep my cousin waiting. By the way, those addresses near your home you asked me to write down last time? Did they come in handy? Cheng Shui blinked. Of course. Fang Yi smiled slightly. What is that for? Oh, that's the relative my cousin is going to visit. I'm afraid the address will be mixed up, so I can only ask you to write it down. Anyway, thank you. Fang Yi. Lan Yuan's voice came faintly from the bottom of the corridor. Coming. Cheng Shui stood downstairs, watching the two people getting into the taxi, and silently took out her mobile phone. In the memo, there were clearly the 3 addresses that Fang Yi had mentioned. Chapter 9, Part 1. Wuching City Central Park. Fang Yi and Lan Yuan stood in front of this hotel with a strong modern atmosphere and full of cruise elements. Let's go. They are all waiting for you in the room. Where is this? Crown Plaza Hotel in Wuching. Hello. Do you have a reservation? The front desk staff showed a standard smile. Lan Yuan handed over the business card in his hand. The staff member's expression changed as he took the business card. It turns out they are Mr. Qiao's guests. Take these two guests to the 18th floor. Here. A staff member in a suit extended his hand to signal. You can enter by placing the card in the sensor area of the door lock. Lan Yuan nodded and followed Zira's sound. She pushed open the door. Don't eat my cake. Haha, good shot. Hey, don't stand in front of me. I can't see the screen. Elegantly decorated, bright, and spacious room. Her brother Lan Mu was currently lying on the sofa, wearing a loose white t-shirt and jeans, staring straight at the screen in front of him. Next to the refrigerator on the other side were the angry Taro and Ah Huan. The two of them were holding a delicate little cake in their hands, standing there with big eyes wide open. Today, Xiao, who is tall and casually dressed, is standing by the kitchen island, not knowing what he is doing. The four people in front of them didn't seem to realize that someone had come in. Lan Yuan's face was expressionless. Hey, I brought you. Fang Yi pressed his eyebrows. With this tone, he thought he had been kidnapped. Welcome our new member, classmate Fang Yi. Lan Mu whistled with a smile and fired a small salute hidden somewhere. Wow, you are just an ordinary person who can sense evil. To be precise, I can't fully perceive it. It's just that those E's are more prominent. Fang Yi responded calmly. So humble. Immediately afterwards, a burst of fierce white light almost blinded Lan Yuan's titanium alloy eyes. Ah Huan, what are you doing? Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot to turn off the flash. Ah Huan still had dark circles under his eyes and raised his hand apologetically. My mission has been completed. I will leave first. Well, go ahead. Zhou held a plate of salad in his hand with a smile. This is our welcome ceremony, and this is also a record of an important moment in your life. Fart. The person who obviously failed to complete the task has to run around the Golden Duck Lake in Wuching holding an enlarged ugly photo of himself. Lan Mu protested loudly. What a vicious punishment. Fortunately, he was wearing sunglasses and Fang Yi had no expression on his face. Now, let's get acquainted formally. After Fang Yi sat down, Xiao thoughtfully put a glass of water on the table. Today, after Fang Yi put on black contact lenses, he dared to open his eyes under the sunglasses without restraint. After slowly adapting to the light, he could see everyone's faces clearly. The captain of the Wuching home team in front of him, Xiao, was actually a mixed race. His facial features were deep, his blonde hair was meticulously combed back with hairspray, and even the beard on his face was carefully taken care of. Just call me Uncle Xiao. Does being a ferryman get paid? Fang Yi pouted. Pancheng didn't tell him his salary that day, just said it was confidential. Ha 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 ha. Xiao on the side couldn't help but patted Fang Yi on the shoulder. Why does this kid love money more than me? That must be true. Lan Mu grinned. How many? It's 6,000 a month for a trainee guardian, and 10,000 a month after becoming a full-time employee. Not only that, but you can also issue an internship certificate. Oh, I forgot that you are not a college student. How about it? It's quite a lot. Fang Yi looked sincere and held Lan Mu's hand. I'm glad to join you. Men are not allowed to touch me. Lan Mu shook Fang Yi's hand away in disgust. How will the salary be paid after joining? Chicken pay transfer. At the other end, Taro and Ah Huan were silently eating a small cake cut into two parts and absent-mindedly listening to the conversation of several people. It seems like your organization is pretty rich. Do you think you can use your powers to make money? What are you thinking about? It's not that serious yet, it's just, our Wuching home team is richer. Lan Mu smiled mysteriously. Okay, let's get down to business. Xiao lit a cigarette and spoke slowly. We are a special organization called the Ferrymen, which can be regarded as half-public officials. You have seen Air and the Sequencers, so I won't introduce them in detail. Although you are not a sequencer, you have the magical ability to sense evil, so we decided to include you as a ferryman and become one of our special personnel. Can I know what Air looks like to you? Fang Yi put down the water glass and his expression moved slightly. It is similar to the state of a ball of flame, and a person is a ball of flame. That's it. Xiao tried hard to search the 300 number sequence in his mind, but he couldn't find the ability of which sequence it was. Fang Yi pointed out the window expressionlessly. But there is a sun in the center of our Wuching city. Sun? All the members of the Wuching home team present were stunned on the spot and couldn't help but follow Fang Yi's hand and look out the window. The sun is here every day. Lan Mu looked confused. Only Xiao was shocked. Did you mean that door? Fang Yi shook his head. I don't know what door you were talking about, but the sun is too bright, so I may not be able to feel every flame. Indeed. Zhou put out his cigarette butt. Your perception is absolutely correct. There is indeed a huge door outside the window that ordinary people cannot see. What? Fang Yi stood up with a shocked look on his face, but there was no wave in his heart. His bet turned out to be right. These ferrymen can also see the door. This door is called the prison door by us. Zhou looked up and looked out the window. In high-rise buildings and downtown areas, you can almost see the totems on the doors and the complicated dark patterns. Today, these 7 prison doors have appeared in 5 countries. In our country alone, 3 of them have appeared. Does this door have any impact? This is indeed a question that Fang Yi doesn't understand, and it is also the information he lacks. A prison door in the old Copper Mountain opened, and the area where it came from, the River of Forgetfulness, destroyed everything around it. Those powerful evils are filled in the area called Forgotten River. They cannot step out of that area. We still don't understand why. Unfortunately, this door appeared in Wuching. The moment it is opened, the city will be destroyed. What? Hearing Qiao's confident words, Fang Ye's pupil shrank under his sunglasses. How did the prison door appear? How to prevent it from being opened? These 7 prison doors came to the world 3 years ago. The only solution is to find the corresponding eclipse and shut it down. 3 years ago? Fang Yi slowly closed his eyes. He felt that the more he knew, the more he seemed to be trapped in a vortex. Chapter 10, Part 1. According to the ferryman's years of research, if the remaining 6 prison doors continue to be opened, then the world will be destroyed? Almost. By then, the dark world will be completely integrated with the surface world, making it easy to understand. Zhou smiled. Dark world? Well, this is also our guess about E. E has a characteristic of being able to blend into the shadows, so some ferrymen made the assumption that there is another world besides the world we live in. That is the world behind the door, and evil also comes from it. What a crazy and bold speculation. Fang Yi forced a smile. It's not groundless. After all, air does come from behind that door. There are people like us who want to close the prison door, but there are also people who want to open it. They call themselves the Pandora Organization and have been eyeing the solar eclipse, but the eclipse did not appear and everyone was like a headless fly. Xiao talked eloquently. To be honest, no one knows what a solar eclipse looks like or how to find it. Fang Yi was silent. Then how did the sequencer appear? What is the source of its ability? Zhou lit a second cigarette. When the first air appeared in the surface world, the first superpower was born. As more and more superpowers appeared, he arranged a series of superpowers. A set of ability sequences belonging to superpowers. Of course, we have to exclude the top 30 god sequencers. The difference from ordinary sequencers is that they have signed a contract with the gods, and their strength is more powerful and uncontrollable. Gods? Fang Ye's breath froze. Do gods really exist? What is a divine contractor? In addition to those sequencers, those with pattern totems on their bodies are the divine contractors. Divine contractors are not only powerful and among the best in terms of ability sequence, their beliefs are much stronger than ordinary people, so they can win the favor of certain gods, which is also an important part of their strength. If the extent to which sequencers can exert their abilities is 100%, then it is 200% for divine contractors. Each person's ability will also have an obvious level of strength, which is also the degree of development of each person's own sequence. There are 6 stages in total, namely 20%, 40%, 60%, 80%, 90%, and 100%. The higher the sequence, the more difficult it is to develop. Are there 100% developed humans in the 4 seasons? Unfortunately, no. The current highest level of development in the 4 seasons is between the 3rd and 4th stages, and they are not contractors of the gods. Each god contractor will have a special totem on his body, which is also the source of power that distinguishes them from ordinary sequencers. Xiao said, we speculate that the power of a sequencer comes from the soul itself, but to put it bluntly, it is also related to one's own beliefs and mental power. The stronger the mental power and belief, the degree of sequence development will also increase. Development is equivalent to the medium, and we are at best the carrier of sequence capabilities. Lan Mu came over with a smile, but don't be discouraged, except for those perverted divine contractors, the sequencers ranked below 30 are actually pretty much the same. Why? Haven't you heard a saying? There is no weak sequence ability, only weak sequencers. Fang Yi slandered. I'm afraid you didn't make it up yourself. For example, if Lan Mu's development rate is 22%, it may not be enough to teleport around 4 times. Hey, why are you using me as an example? Lan Mu glared. Fang Yi was thoughtful. How many sequence ability users are there in total? Fang Yi asked. According to the records on the ability sequence list, there are 300. That means everyone can only have one ability? No, even if it is a sequence ability, you will choose the carrier independently, but there are indeed lucky people with dual sequences in the 4 seasons headquarters. Lan Mu stretched out a lot, and he almost felt sleepy after hearing this long list of words. Xiaofeng, let me tell you, when I first awakened my powers, I thought I was unique in the world, but ended up being ranked number 89. Lan Mu complained, I don't know who has the least foresight to rank up, and he is the first sequencer. Such a lack of foresight. This is probably the situation. The more you come into contact with Air's information, the more you will understand it. Zhou's expression was a little tired, and under his high brows were a pair of sharp gray eyes. Having said so much in short, you are welcome to join. Night falls and neon lights flash. Until Fong Yi finished his meal and walked out of the Crown Plaza Hotel, his legs were still a little weak. If these people knew, Li Lu would die because of him. He had no doubt that Zhou's fists, which looked as big as sandbags, would crush his head mercilessly. With his current strength, it is impossible to fight against a room full of sequencers. It was even more impossible to ask Suan to come out. Hey, Xiaofeng, do you want me to take you for a ride? With a roar, Lan Mu appeared in front of him riding a very sexy red motorcycle. Thank you. I'd better take the bus back. Fong Yi refused politely and couldn't help but take another look at Lan Mu. The personality gap between the two siblings was too big. With Lan Mu's unreliable character, maybe everyone would be gone while riding. Aren't you going to stay here with them? I'm different from those idle people. I'm a college student who wants to go to college early in the morning. Lan Mu curled his lips and took off his helmet visor. Then I'll leave first. Watching Lan Mu leave the rear of the car gracefully, he couldn't help but think of the last words Zhou emphasized to him before leaving. Remember, don't let anyone know about the ferryman and Ida. After Fong Yi got off the bus, he walked home from the platform. It's about 10 minutes away, not too far. Walking on the streets of the old community, the evening wind blows and the shadows of the trees sway. Fong Yi, who was enjoying the coolness on his face, paused and his eyes turned cold. Someone is following him. It shouldn't be Lan Yuan. Even if she protects herself, as a ferryman, there is no need to use tracking. He walked quickly into the community holding a guide stick. The moment he turned the corner, he caught a glimpse of a figure wearing a peaked cap from the corner of his eye. Female? Fong Yi frowned. This person's tracking was not considered covert, maybe because he thought he was blind. The distance was very close. But he couldn't remember when he met such a number one person. After walking around and walking downstairs, Fong Yi breathed a sigh of relief and said, "It would be disrespectful to follow me any longer." "How do you know?" A cry came from behind him. Sure enough, there is no malice. Fong Yi waved his hand calmly, and the huge shadow in the stairwell disappeared silently. When the woman who had followed him stood in front of him and took off her baseball cap, Fong Ye's eyebrows knitted together deeply. Is it her? Chapter 11, Part 1. The person in front of me was the ordinary girl wearing black-rimmed glasses in the hospital. Luli. Has her memory not been erased? Your perception is still as sharp as that day. Luli smiled bitterly. Is it you? Why are you following me? Fong Yi was indeed a little confused. Who would have thought that Luli, who was relatively brave in the elevator at that time, would now be full of fear and panic? Of course, Fong Yi could only pretend not to see it. Please help me. Her voice was trembling, her face was pale, and she had obviously lost a lot of weight. Shall I help you? Fong Yi frowned again. What happened to you? Although Luli was frightened, she still spoke in a very orderly manner. Apparently her memory had not been wiped. That day, she was still in shock, and after dictating what happened that day at the police station, she returned to the dormitory. She didn't choose to tell anyone. However, her other roommates were hesitant. Only then did she find out that one of her roommates was dead. Moreover, the skin is still peeled off. At first, several girls were very frightened, thinking that some sadistic murderer had sneaked into the campus. But the school suppressed the incident directly and concluded it was suicide. Luli knew her dead roommate very well because they ate and went to class together every day. She knew that it was impossible for her to commit suicide because of her personality, and it was obviously abnormal for her to die in such a miserable manner. Not to mention, she had just experienced what happened in the hospital and learned this kind of news immediately after returning to the dormitory. Then why didn't you call the police? What's the use of calling me a blind person? Fong Ye's voice was calm. That day, I went to the hospital just to see the psychology department. As for why I went there, Luli choked up. You go on. Okay. The young man in front of him seemed to have some kind of calming magic power. Luli took a deep breath and spoke again. Half a month ago, she had a roommate named Chu Ying. When Chu Ying was not in the dormitory on a date with her boyfriend, she walked along the stairs of the dormitory bed and accidentally saw something strange under Chu Ying's pillow. After getting closer and opening it, it turned out to be a human face. She was so frightened that she took a week off and spent every day in nightmares. Extremely serious psychological problems have developed. It wasn't until she went to the hospital that she learned about the monster named E and the existence of the ferryman. Then when she went to the police station, she did accept Pan Cheng's memory erasure. However, due to the severe trauma, he was almost schizophrenic. As a result, Pan Cheng's hypnosis was not successful at all. But she also changed her mindset. Because, compared to all the people who died, she felt that she was already the luckiest one. So, you want to contact the ferryman through me? Fong Yi raised his eyebrows. That's right. Luli looked eager. I know you were shocked when you were not dead. You must be different. So I think you must have the ferryman's contact information. She is a smart girl. Fong Ye's eyes narrowed slightly, and the phone in his pocket vibrated slightly. He put the phone receiver to his ear. His expression changed, and he immediately spread his hands. Lan Yuan, you heard this. What should you do? Lan Yuanmei, who was already squatting on the big tree downstairs of Fang Ye's house, was heartbeating. Can this kid feel it even when I'm squatting here? What? Luli was stunned. Who is Lan Yuan? Well, the guy on the tree is the ferryman you're looking for. Fang Yi raised his chin. Susu. A burst of leaves fell, and Lan Yuan jumped down from the tree angrily. Tell me, how did you know I was there? Are you lying to everyone? In fact, you are not blind at all. I'm not lying. Fang Yi raised his phone with an innocent look. Xiao just told me that you were squatting in front of my house to protect me. Whispering sound. Lan Yuan snorted coldly and was shocked. A pair of hands had already grasped her palm. Are you the ferryman? Please help me. Otherwise, not only me, but also many people in our school will die. Luli wiped away her tears. Yes, help her. Fang Yi cooed at the side. Lan Yuan glared at Fang Yi fiercely. Seeing Lu Li's expression of pain, his heart softened again. As a ferryman, of course I have the obligation to eliminate evil. I know your story. Give me your contact information and let me know if anything happens. I will handle it tomorrow. Thank you, thank you. Lu Li burst into tears. Looking at her leaving figure, Lan Yuan sighed quietly. I didn't expect that you would still be cold-faced and kind-hearted, so I can only wish you good luck tomorrow. Fang Yi waved his hand. Etc. What? You go with me tomorrow? Lan Yuan said expressionlessly. It seems that you don't plan to notify others to join you. What if I make a mistake? Why don't you just hide? Can't you sense evil? Of course you have to go with me. What if her roommate is just an ordinary murderer? Lan Yuan said lightly. Oh. Fang Yi looked depressed. The next afternoon, Wuqing Li's girls' school. Mom, I'm going to see my friends today. You don't have to wait for me to have dinner. Fang Yi sent a voice message and stood on the rooftop of a building with a bag on his back and an unhappy look on his face. Why is it so slow? What's the rush? Lan Yuan, who pushed open the rooftop door, calmly took out 2 sets of school uniforms from his bag. Put on. What? Fang Ye's heart skipped a beat when he looked at the clothes. Their school uniform. Fang Yi took the school uniform with an embarrassed look on his face and touched it. Why is it still women's clothing? Of course, it's a girls' school. Fang Yi closed his eyes. Everything was done to cooperate with the ferryman's work. Through this incident, he could confirm his ability to observe evil. He ended the strong psychological suggestion to himself and took a deep breath. Are you sure you want to change here? Otherwise? Just the few ribs on your body, are you still afraid of being exposed? Lan Yuan was disgusted, and the movements of his hands did not stop at all. You really didn't call anyone else? They all went on other missions. Oh. As Lan Yuan's pleated skirt fell to the floor, his eyes under his sunglasses almost fell out, right? Even though he is blind on the surface, it doesn't mean that he is really blind. It's just that Lan Yuan was wearing a pair of black safety pants under her skirt. On the outside of that slender and tight thigh, there are actually several exquisite butterfly knives and a wireless communicator tied to it. Don't lose this wig either. Hearing this, Fang Yi forced out a smile and said, Don't bully others too much. You can't see it yourself anyway, so what are you afraid of? Lan Yuan snorted lightly and directly put it on Fang Ye's head. This is a completely closed girls' school. Don't talk after entering, otherwise you won't be discovered. What's the matter with having a she-male feeling? Looking at Fang Ye's appearance at this moment, Lan Yuan burst into laughter. What the hell? Fang Yi glanced at himself in the glass door, and his vision went dark, which was as tragic as expected. But he couldn't show anything, so he could only swallow this breath. It seems that I have to find some time to recover my blindness unexpectedly. The school was bathed in the orange glow of the setting sun. After school, there were still scattered students walking outside the campus. Aren't we leaving yet? As the door was closed by the guard, the heavy sound of chains clashing echoed throughout the campus. Fang Yi stood on the rooftop, looking at the gradually falling night, and couldn't help but look at Lan Yuan. Lan Yuan's eyes were calm, and he stood there without responding to Fang Ye's words. The next second, her left pupil flashed with a dark golden light, which became brighter and brighter against the dark blue sky. It was like a cluster of golden flames burning in her eyes. Chapter 12, Part 1. What kind of sequence ability is this? Looking at the strange-looking Lan Yuan, Fang Ji's heart beat loudly. Teaching building. After she whispered this information with a frown, the blazing golden color in her left eye slowly faded until it disappeared. Let's go. What did you just do? What does the teaching building mean? Fang Yi asked tentatively. Observe where they are. Lan Yuan's expression was cold and extremely cool. Is this your sequence ability? Well, to be precise, he is a divine contractor. Fang Yi was shocked. A divine contractor? No wonder Uncle Qiao asked Lan Yuan to protect him. The entire corridor was dimly lit. Lan Yuan found a rope somewhere and asked Fang Yi to tie it around her wrist. while she held the other end. The two of them walked back and forth through the stairwell. Ouch! Fang Ye's whole body collided with Lan Yuan, who suddenly stopped. Why did you stop suddenly? He rubbed his sore chin. Just jump over from here. Lan Yuan looked around and opened the latch of the second-floor stairwell window. A tall wall separated the two schools. The other side was their destination tonight. Haha, do you think a blind person like me can jump long distance? I'll carry you. What? How could you carry me over such a high wall? Don't fall to my death when the time comes. Fang Yi refused righteously. What would it look like for a girl to carry her? Don't be impatient. Lan Yuan said in disgust, squatting behind him and adding, the physical fitness of both sequencers and divine contractors is twice as high as that of ordinary people even in the first stage. Fang Yi looked at the slim and tall figure with long hair scattered in front of him and couldn't help but reveal a smile on his face. All right. As expected, Lan Yuan carried Fang Yi on his back and easily jumped over the wall, his figure passing by in a flash. Lan Yuan, how's the situation? Xiao's voice came from Lan Yuan's waist. I have observed the location and have just entered the school now. Remember your mission, you just need to investigate. If the situation is not right, retreat immediately. I know. Lan Yuan cut off the communication and tied him back to his waist. I thought you were acting privately. Fang Yi raised his eyebrows. With you here, how could I not report it to Uncle Xiao? She turned to look at Fang Yi. Our main task this time is to find out whether the student's death is related to air. Don't do it. Even if it's a low-level disaster, it's not something the two of us can handle. I can't do anything, but is the Yi so strong? Fang Yi looked strange and couldn't help but think of Suan. He still didn't know what level of Yi the old boy was. I would ask him another time. He jumped off the wall after Lan Yuan, looking from Lan Yuan to the back of the teaching building, then turned to the surroundings. The area they are currently in is a dormitory area. No, I can handle it on my own, but not if I have to protect you. Lan Yuan curled his lips and looked up at the numbers listed next to the building. Hearing this, Fang Ye's face darkened and he remained silent. Respecting the elderly, caring for the young, and helping the disabled are ideas I have learned since I was a child. Anyway, this mission is just to investigate, and there may not be any misfortunes. Why do I feel that you talk more? Fart. Lan Yuan turned his head, looking annoyed. The two walked through the woods and hid in the bushes under the teaching building. How long have you been squatting here? Did you make a wrong observation? The two of them have been squatting in the bushes for half an hour. If someone saw it, they would probably think that someone was defecating everywhere. Cut the nonsense. Oh. The teaching building in front of them was dark. 10 minutes later, the candlelight on the fourth floor flashed past, and Lan Yuan quickly locked the position. Classroom 408. Lan Yuan still chose to carry Fang Yi on his back, quickly ran into the corridor from the outside, and strode up the stairs. He hid outside the door in an instant. You can wait for me in another classroom later. She breathed out lightly. I know. Fang Yi curled his lips. Lan Yuan slightly poked his head and looked through the glass window on the classroom door. 4 girls were sitting in the room at the moment, with a burning candle on the table in the middle. They have green faces. One of the 4 is slightly chubby, one wears black-rimmed glasses, one is tall, and the other is ordinary. Among them, the one wearing black-rimmed glasses is Luli. Fang Yi squinted his eyes and was startled. He felt a heat in his ears and his face suddenly turned red. Do you want to know what they are doing? Lan Yuan Fu said softly. Do what? She looked over for a while and shook her head. They are playing a game of attracting ghosts. Fang Yi suddenly felt a layer of goosebumps all over his body and subconsciously wanted to escape from here. Huh, why am I afraid of ghosts? Fang Yi was confused for a moment. Is he afraid of ghosts? Lan Yuan looked at Fang Yi, who suddenly turned pale, with a strange expression. Fang Ye's reaction at the moment reminded her untimely of Li Lu, the cowardly boy who grabbed a girl and screamed in the haunted house. The two of them are even somewhat similar in some places. Fang Yi and Lan Yuan hid outside the classroom door, looking at the candlelight reflected on the faces of the 4 girls. They felt a bit weird. They had different expressions, and their mouths opened and closed in low voices. They didn't know what they were talking about. As the flickering candlelight in the room suddenly went out, Lan Yuan's vision fell into ink-like darkness. In the darkness, Fang Ye's pupils were shaking. Could it be that the ghost-calling ritual of these old girls was really successful? Why did the candle suddenly turn dark? A thin layer of sweat broke out on Fang Ye's forehead. Just as he was about to stand up, he was grabbed by a hand. Lan Yuan's calm phoenix eyes flickered faintly in the darkness. If you are afraid, just go over first. You can't see it anyway. At this moment, the classroom door was suddenly opened, and a faint female voice came from above the two of them. Stop hiding outside. I will be home late tonight, so we have to put the food in the refrigerator for him. Fang's mother muttered to herself while tidying up the house. As if she suddenly remembered something, she walked into Fang Ye's room and started rummaging around. Those unnecessary books must be put away, Otherwise, they will take up too much space. This old man left a pile of books behind when he left. Fangma babbled and quickly wiped the dust on the books with a feather duster. Suddenly, a black notebook fell out from the cracks of the bookshelf. What is this? When did my eye have the habit of writing a diary? She opened the notebook in confusion and was shocked. Today is my father's first day, and it's all my fault. The official report was that he died in an accident. I know it was not an accident. That night, I saw a huge black door hanging in the middle of the city. It was so strange that no one around me could see it. Is it an illusion? Or am I mentally abnormal? I saw people, able to use strange abilities, and those strange monsters, I heard. Their names are ferrymen. Dad, Mom, and I miss you very much. Fang Ma's eyes were slightly red, and her hands were turning downwards with trembling hands. Except for the increasingly scrawled handwriting on the first page, all the pages after the notebook were densely covered with black ink pen, and the confusing lines formed a mess. It looks more like empty pupils. Until Fang Ma turned to the last page. I signed a contract with Calamity. There is no God in this world. Chapter 13 Four Corners Game, Part 1. Wuching Liza Girls' School. 8:30 in the evening. The two people who were discovered were quickly invited into the classroom. Fang Yi sat on the chair with a lifeless expression. What a hearty start, but he died before he could escape. It looks like it's from our school. Why are there people with disabilities in our school? Do you two want to play with us? Or do you want to secretly file a complaint to the teaching office? The girl with an ordinary face and the girl with a slightly chubby figure were the first to speak. Luli secretly glanced at the two of them, a little unclear about the situation. She obviously didn't understand why Lan Yuan asked her to organize this ghost recruiting game. And then it was discovered. We were just passing by out of curiosity. Fang Ye's eyes darkened when he heard Lan Yuan's lame excuse. Only if you believe him, he turned his eyes. It turns out they were discovered right at the beginning. Looking at the clear reflection on the window in the candlelight, he suddenly understood. Curious? Then why did you appear in the teaching building? The ordinary-looking girl stared at Lan Yuan's beautiful face, her tone bored. Then, why don't you guys play? My boyfriend is still sending me messages. He said he would video chat with me today. The tall girl interrupted her and pulled up another fat girl. Wang Lele, Luli, I won't accompany you two this time. Ah Ching and I will go back to the dormitory and wait for you. The fat girl named Ah Ching nodded repeatedly. Originally, they were in the same dormitory. After a roommate they had a good relationship with died some time ago, they were forced to play the ghost recruiting game by these two people, saying that they could recruit her back. Chewing, if you're scared, just leave. Why are you dragging Ah Ching along? Wang Lele grabbed Ah Ching coldly. You. Ask Ah Ching if he wants to play, that's scary. Chewing glared at Wang Lele, who had an ordinary face, and pulled Ah Ching back. I don't want to play, I'm scared. Ah Ching's fleshy face was full of panic. Let them go, there are enough people anyway. Luli looked at Chewing, who was pulling Ah Ching out of the classroom in a panic, with a half-smile under her black-rimmed glasses. Do you want to play the ghost-catching game with them? Fang Yi was speechless. I'm already blind, and you still won't let me go. Lan Yuan looked at Fang Yi with his eyes, nose and heart, obviously not intending to pay attention to Fang Yi anymore. Then what are you playing? For Corners Game. Wang Lele responded. Well, let's start the very common game of attracting ghosts. Lan Yuan had no expression on his face. You want to play even if you can't see? Fang Yi tried his best to lower his voice to a high point. Wang Lele and Luli on the side looked puzzled as to why this girl's voice was so ugly. Lan Yuan nodded. The curtains were drawn and the candles were extinguished. The four people quickly stood in the four corners of the classroom according to the rules, namely Wang Lele, Luli, Fang Yi, and Lan Yuan. Lan Yuan came over and patted Fang Yi on the shoulder and coughed. Fang Yi groped for the wall, walked forward and patted Luli on the shoulder, then coughed in the same way. After several people moved to the second circle, nothing unusual happened. Wang Lele breathed a sigh of relief, and his back was soaked with cold sweat. Although he was dragged over by Luli to play, it seemed to be just a folk legend. Cough. As the third round of coughing sounded behind him, Fang Yi twitched the corner of his mouth. This is not Lan Yuan's voice. Where is she? What's going on now? Feeling something pat behind him, Fang Yi was helpless now, but he couldn't act rashly. In such a quiet and dark environment, the senses are infinitely amplified. The smell of blood escapes from the darkness, and Fang Yi has the illusion that his feet are starting to become slippery. Wait, the smell of blood? He walked forward bravely and patted Luli on the shoulder. No, it's not the feel. The shoulders are obviously thicker. This is? Ah Ching has left. No more fun. Fang Yi heard Wang Lele scream and rushed over to open the curtains. Fragments of moonlight fell into the classroom. In the cold and sad light, Fang Yi saw Ah Ching whose entire face had been peeled off. She stood in the corner, blood blistering on her face. Luli, who heard the scream, turned around in surprise and saw the miserable-looking Ah Ching. Screams came from the classroom and echoed in the empty campus. Fang Yi glanced around and saw that Lan Yuan had disappeared. A human-faced monster with piles of blood and flesh clung to the ceiling, staring eerily at the three people in the classroom. That face was clearly that of Chu Ying. Sure enough, you were the one who killed Xiaoyu. Lu Li pretended to be calm and looked at the monster transformed by Chu Ying. Her heart couldn't stop trembling. What is this? Why is it different from the day in the hospital? Wang Lei fell to the ground with a look of fear on his face, unwilling to believe that this roommate who lived with him day and night was actually a monster. I didn't expect you to kill Ah Ching. Don't you two have the best relationship? Haha, don't you want to play together? Chu Ying twisted her body and looked ferocious. Lu Li looked uncertain. Since I found Fang Yi last time and asked Lan Yuan for help, she chose to tell Wang Lei about the incident. Although Wang Lei had a very weak relationship with everyone, she was frightened after hearing the incident and decided to help her together. She avoided talking about Ah Ching, who had a better relationship with Chu Ying, because they might also be accomplices. It was originally after discussion that she would perform a scene with Wang Lei to test Chu Ying. After all, we get along day and night, and it was only her personal conclusion. Unexpectedly, after being tested like this, Chu Ying couldn't help but take action. Why did you kill Xiaoyu and Ah Ching? Lu Li pushed up her glasses. Because she can see that door. Chu Ying grinned grimly. As for Ah Ching, it's easy. You will all die here anyway. Door. Lu Li and Wang Lei looked at each other, confused. Fang Yi narrowed his eyes and quietly leaned towards the corner of the classroom. Sure enough, there is an evil lurking in the girls' dormitory, so their other dead roommate is probably the newly awakened sequencer. However, it seems that the form of Yi is not just that of Su, and Chu Ying did not answer the two people's questions, but waved the flesh and blood tentacles on her body to stab them. Run. Lei. Seeing Chu Ying attacking without hesitation, Lu Li pushed Wang Lei away. Her face was bleak. She didn't know whether she was lucky or not. Whether she was going to the hospital or in the dormitory, she would run into two monsters one after another. Is it too reckless? She looked pale and looked back at the cell phone hidden in the cabinet that was recording. Bang! The glass was shattered instantly, and the girl's black hair was flying in the night sky. Her left phoenix eye was filled with a faint golden light, and two butterfly knives flashing with cold light turned on her slender fingertips, instantly cutting off Chu Ying's flesh and blood tentacles. It is a kind of goo, low-level fight against evil. Prepare to eliminate it. Chapter 14, Part 1. Who are you? Several people present shouted at the same time, and Wang Lei looked at Lan Yuan, who rushed in from the window in surprise. No, isn't this girl not in the room all the time? Lan Yuan took off the communication phone from his waist and threw it into Fang Ye's arms. Go and explain to Qiao. I don't have time to pay attention to him now. Hello, Uncle Qiao? You two retreat now. But Fang Yi hesitated for a moment. If they left directly now, the remaining Lu Li and Wang Lei would definitely die. No, if you die, you will die. What does it have to do with him? Don't worry, this is a medium-sized heir that has just undergone a metamorphosis. Qiao said in a deep voice. Medium combat? Do you mean medium combat strength? Fang Yi immediately recalled what Lan Yuan said. It was difficult to deal with the low combat E, let alone the medium combat. He looked intently. The situation on the court has changed. As Chu Ying's flesh-squeezing body expanded, it unknowingly filled up half of the classroom. Its appearance was completely different from that of Suan back then. Lan Yuan, who had a slight upper hand, gradually began to struggle. Are you in the middle of a battle? She obviously heard Xiao's voice, and her face darkened. Because she is not the type that is good at fighting. The low-level ones are still capable of fighting. The mid-level ones? Leave here now, and I can let you two go. Chu Ying faintly uttered these words with the human face attached to her. Although the sequencer made her salivate, it was not easy to deal with. Lu Li and Wang Lei's expressions changed. How much hatred did they have? This was a rhythm that wanted to kill them all in the dormitory. You two leave immediately. Qiao stood in front of the French window of the hotel, holding the communication phone and looking deeply. Put Fang Ye's safety as the first priority. After receiving Lan Yuan's first order, he sent Lan Mu there. Because of the location of Lan Mu's university, it is currently the closest to them. Since this matter is related to disaster, and it is still a battle, the best decision at the moment is to evacuate first, which is the safest method. Lan Yuan turned back and glanced at Lu Li and Wang Lei, who had panicked faces, gritted his teeth, and ran out the door. Fang Yi, let's retreat first. Chu Ying watched the two people leaving with satisfaction. Now, no one can interrupt our game. Lan Yuan couldn't stop panting in the corridor, blood dripping down his arms and falling to the ground. The strength of Yi in medium combat is indeed far different from that of Yi in low combat. If the consumption continues, they will all die here today. Fang Yi, it's not that I don't want to save. Lan Yuan turned his head, his expression stagnant. but there was no one behind him. Only a communication machine with its channel cut off remained quietly on the ground. Lan Yuan's expression was blank, and a stupid idea arose in his mind. Could he go back to save them? In classroom 408. Why am I back? Fang Yi stood stupidly at the door with his guide stick in hand, looking at each other in disbelief with the two people in the classroom. He seemed to be running over uncontrollably. Now that you're back, don't leave. Chu Ying shouted intoxicatedly. Her body broke through the classroom and squeezed onto the corridor. Her scarlet flesh and blood body rolled and squeezed under the moonlight, reflecting a strange light. Thank you for coming back to save us. The bound Luli looked pale and grateful, and the black-rimmed glasses on her face were knocked off. Sure enough, the boy was still the same as when he was in the hospital. In order to delay time, let her go alone. Wang Lele next to him was also scarred. Their feet had already sunk into Chu Ying's huge body, making it extremely difficult to stay standing. It's so uncomfortable, I can't breathe. Heavy pressure came from Chu Ying's body, constantly squeezing Wang Lele and Luli, making a crunching sound of bones cracking. Looking at the corners of their mouths spilling blood, Fang Yi twitched his lips and was immediately entangled by two tentacles and hung upside down from the ceiling. As the sunglasses fell, Fang Yi closed his eyes. Now, I can't reveal that I'm not blind yet. He firmly grasped the tentacles wrapped around his neck and kicked Chu Ying in the face. Why are you coming back? Lan Yuan gritted his teeth as he returned, and with a beautiful spin, he cut off the flesh and blood tentacles that bound Luli and Wang Lele, and grabbed the two of them and retreated. Jump down. Ahem, what? Luli and Wang Lele felt the fresh air rushing into their chests and kept coughing. She grabbed the collars of the two girls, and the three of them leaned against the edge of the window and fell backward together under the inertia. Following a scream, a dull sound came from the bottom of the building. Looking at the three people escaping, Chu Ying's eyes were scarlet, and her body squirmed and expanded to form a flesh and blood cage, imprisoning Fang Yi inside. It's not too late for you to eat first. Fang Yi stood among them, the corner of his mouth twitching. With a roar, Lan Mu stopped the motorcycle, glanced at the two girls lying on it with weak breaths, and initially determined that the two had suffered multiple fractures throughout their bodies. Ahem, brother. Fang Yi is still inside. Lan Yuan stood on the soft cushion she had just brought from the sports warehouse, shaking her dizzy head. Lan Mu's phoenix eyes were as gloomy as water, staring at the airtight and ghostly classroom on the 4th floor. He used space folding, but he was unable to penetrate the wall of flesh and blood. You take these two girls to the hospital first. Lan Mu was holding a long knife wrapped in black silk behind him. As soon as he finished speaking, he appeared at the entrance of the aisle the next second. As the black silk slid down, a beautiful sword light passed through, and a huge crack was opened in the flesh and blood wall, which was then quickly closed. Lan Mu took a breath, turned his wrist, and the swords and lights intertwined, like a bulldozer approaching the classroom inch by inch from the corridor. Chu Ying is also in a bad mood now. She has been dormant in school for so long, but she didn't expect to be discovered by the guardian. Fang Yi grabbed the scarlet whip that was piercing his heart, and the sharp barbs on it scraped his palm to pieces of blood. He was slammed to the ground. His eyes suddenly flashed with gold, and blood surged in his chest. It hurts, it hurts. His eyes cannot drive away all evils. Only those in Su-An's form can be driven by him. But after he visited the entire Wuching, he could only detect one Su, and Fang Yi gritted his teeth and stood up unsteadily. Why? Why is he doing such a stupid thing? He can obviously just walk away. In his mind, the young man's clear eyes flashed across his mind. Could it be that because he absorbed Lu's ability, his personality was indirectly affected? Does his ability have such side effects? Fang Yi had a gloomy face, and his thoughts were uncertain. A whistling whip of flesh and blood knocked him away. As his body collided with the cement wall, he groaned and slowly slid down. You don't overestimate your capabilities. Chu Ying looked at Fang Yi, who got up again with an expression of contempt. It's time to end the game of playing house. Xiaofeng. As two sword lights passed by, Lan Mu instantly appeared in front of Fang Yi. 4 or 5 scarlet whips that were fired at Fang Yi were all broken. The sections were flat and smooth. Even after they were separated from Chu Ying's body, they were still on the ground. The ground squirms. Fang Yi. It's not good. Lan Mu picked up the communication phone and frowned. If you can't beat them, run away. You really underestimate me. Chapter 15, Part 1. Lan Mu paused, holding the long knife and stepping on Chu Ying's body to avoid her tentacles that were constantly sweeping towards him. He found that Chu Ying's attack speed was getting slower and slower. He didn't even need to use space folding. He could dodge Chu Ying's attacks just by relying on his physical fitness that was several times higher than ordinary people. It seems that forming such a huge body takes a lot of effort on you. Lan Mu didn't want to delay any longer. A strange spatial fluctuation occurred, and he instantly appeared right in front of Chu Ying's face. As the long knife in his hand was raised high, it was chopped down. Chu Ying's huge body was split into two amidst her sharp screams, but she did not die. Her body was like some kind of snail, shrinking rapidly until it became the size of a normal person. But her arms suddenly turned into cone-shaped flesh and blood joints. At this moment, the wall of flesh and blood that spread to the corridor and wrapped the classroom instantly turned into a pool of shadow, converging at Chu Ying's feet. A strong fishy smell spread in the air. Clang, clang, clang. In just 3 seconds, amid the flash of swords and shadows, Lan Mu had already collided with Chu Ying's limbs with his sword nearly a dozen times. Lan Mu was panting slightly. His body and face were covered with wounds of various sizes. Although they were not serious, he obviously did not expect that air in the battle would be so difficult to fight back before death. Chu Ying had a vicious look on her face. Her left hand was cut off directly on the ground and rolled to the side. Sequencer! Sequencer! Chu Ying screamed, looking crazy. Her severe injuries made her body desperately thirsty for the flesh and blood of the sequencer. You smell so good. Lan Mu looked disgusted and raised the knife again. I'm going to kill all of you damn sequencers. Chu Ying looked ferocious. A large, smelly, and thick blood mist erupted from her body, and the classroom was filled with scarlet, as if she was about to unleash some ultimate move. Looking at Chu Ying, who was planning to fight him to the death, Lan Mu swayed. His figure was elegant, and the long knife made of unknown material in his hand slashed away with an unbreakable sword light. This knife is a sure kill. At the moment of contact with the arthropod, Lan Mu was stunned. This feels wrong. Is it empty? No. Chu Ying ran away. Escape very decisively. She was like white snow under the scorching sun, instantly melting into a pool of shadow, hiding in the darkness and disappearing. Lan Mu, who was standing there, twitched the corners of his mouth. I didn't expect that I could scream so hard and run so fast. Aren't you going to chase me? Fang Yi picked up his sunglasses. His face was pale, and the pain in his chest had eased a lot. No more chasing. He can hide in the shadows and is difficult to track. Lan Mu let out a breath, then raised his eyebrows and looked at Fang Yi. You are not a bad boy. How dare you come back to save them after you are like this? Is it possible that you are such a hero and saved the beauty? Uncle Qiao, the heir in the battle ran away, but it's not because I didn't use my full strength. Lan Mu picked his ears and leaned lazily by the window. Go back first? Boom. A violent explosion came from Lan Mu's communication machine, and his pupils suddenly shrank. Uncle Qiao? Zira. There was a hissing sound from the communication machine that had lost its signal, and Lan Mu took it away from his ear with a look of surprise. What's wrong? Fang Yi asked. Go back to the crown. Lan Mu didn't have time to explain. Wuching Viaduct. A red Simo was speeding up. Lan Mu's expression was condensed, his lips pursed into a straight line, his black hair dancing wildly in the wind, and he didn't bother to put on the helmet hanging at the rear of the car. A taxi followed closely behind him. Master, drive faster. Lan Yuan urgently urged the middle-aged driver, who was about 30 or 40 years old, in the driving seat. The uncle driver glanced at Fang Yi, who had sharp eyebrows in the rearview mirror and closed his eyes tightly with a bruise on his face. Then he glanced at the handsome Lan Mu riding a motorcycle in front of him and couldn't help but curse. I wonder which rich second generation stole someone else's girlfriend. Today's young people are really having fun. Little girl, I'm already driving very fast. If I speed any faster, I'll be fined and deducted points. He shook his head helplessly. Is that enough? Lan Yuan glared and threw a wad of red banknotes onto his co-pilot. Okay, you two sit tight. I am known as the best car god in Wuching in the industry. The driver's body shook, and the speed suddenly increased a lot. What's going on? Fang Yi frowned. Bang! A violent sound came from in front of several people. Lan Mu's pupils shrank, and he swung the front of the car suddenly, drifting sideways to stop Simo. Deep black tire marks were instantly wiped out on the bridge. Gee! The driver stepped on the brakes hard and looked at the viaduct with a huge hole in front of him in surprise. For a time, dust billowed and thick smoke rose everywhere. Did you come so fast? Lan Mu stared in front of him and pulled out a long knife from behind. As the smoke dispersed, 3 figures slowly emerged from it. Oh, it's really easy for us to find. A tall, thin man with a sallow complexion walked out first. His appearance is one that cannot be found in a crowd. At this moment, his 5 fingers were like lava, with a faint red light under the burnt brown color. Were you responsible for the explosion at Xiao's side? Lan Mu's face was as dark as water. Serial number 167, explosion, Holdergene. After joining the ferrymen, one of the lessons they learned was to memorize the names, appearances, and sequence abilities of all sequencers known to the Pandora organization. Except for the 10 bishops of Pandora, he knew most of them by heart. However, why did Pandora's people appear in front of them arrogantly this time? Did you discover something? It's me. What can you do? The tall, thin man spread his hands. I don't know. What attracted you Pandora's bunch of Maine dogs here? I don't know what the purpose of sending you a few low cereal fish here this time. Lan Mu curled his lips and took the lead in taunting. But there was a drumbeat in his heart. Although there are 3 of them here, my sister Lan Yuan's combat effectiveness against people is basically 0. Not to mention Fang Yi. Apart from his special ability to sense disaster, he is just an ordinary blind boy. The tall and thin man was about to have an attack when a generous palm was placed on his shoulder. Don't talk nonsense with this kid. The person the bishop who took away the first seat is talking about is the first task. A bearded man who was as tall and strong as a bear appeared behind him, and his voice was as rich as a human being. First seat? Lan Mu frowned. Taishan, his ability is sequence number 259, significantly improved. Long time no see, Lan Mu. All living beings are equal under the order of gods. I should have taught you this with my sword, but you still love to talk big as always. When he saw a thin white-haired boy behind the 2 men, Lan Mu's face suddenly darkened, and the long knife in his hand tightened. Chew crazy. Chapter 16, Part 1. The white-haired boy seemed to have congenital albinism. In addition to his white hair, even his pupils and eyelashes were very light in color. His face had holes in at least 4 or 5 places and his skin was mottled. Chu Feng looked excited at this moment. His eyes kept wandering between Lan Yuan and Fang Yi in the taxi. Who does our chief bishop want? Before Lan Mu could recover, Chu Feng was already speeding towards the taxi with a dagger in his hand. His ability is sequence number 212, injury sharing. It is originally a passive ability, but he himself is an out-and-out lunatic with the sequence. Before Chu Feng's dagger could reach Lan Yuan, Lan Mu had already teleported. With a swing of the long knife, his dagger was opened. There is no one you want here. Lan Mu looked at him coldly. Chu Feng exerted force with his left leg, made a fake move to avoid Lan Mu's knife, and then hit him in the abdomen with a hidden punch. The 89th ranked guardian is not that good either. Chu Feng smiled provocatively. Or are you just sitting on the ferry and being a waste? Your sequence development level has not reached 20%? Fart. Lan Mu didn't have time to feel the dull pain coming from his abdomen, and he drove back the strong man Taishan who was rushing towards him with a knife. Quick fight. Taishan roared, and his already strong body became taller under the significant improvement. His 2-meter-long body was like a human tank, crashing into the taxi carrying Fang Yi and Lan Yuan. Is this a movie? The driver murmured. There was a burst of spatial fluctuation energy, and Lan Mu instantly appeared in the passenger seat. After he kicked the driver out of the car, he immediately turned around and hugged Fang Yi and Lan Yuan. Squeak. With a heartbreaking sound of metal twisting, the taxi's body was severely deformed under the squeeze of Mount Tai and the viaduct railings, like a squashed can. After the front of the car was greatly dented, the driver's seat airbag deployed. My car. The driver's eyes widened. Compared with the unusual state of the big man in front of him, he was more concerned that his car was damaged. Lan Mu held a card between his fingers and threw it into the driver's arms. The money in it is enough to compensate for your car. There is no password. Now, get out of here right now. Oh, okay. The driver woke up as if from a dream and ran to the other end of the viaduct, crawling on the ground. He seemed to be involved in something terrible. Oh, why do you only use space folding to escape? You look like a mouse. Chu Feng licked the nails on his lips and turned his eyes to the panting Lan Mu trio on the other side. A thin layer of sweat broke out on Lan Mu's forehead. He stared at the 3 Pandoras who were gradually approaching, his thoughts changing rapidly. This is the second time he has brought people to use space folding, but the difference from the first time is that this time he has brought 2 people with him, which is more expensive than imagined. You take Fang Yi first and I'll follow. Lan Mu lowered his voice. But I can't ride a motorcycle. Lan Yuan was stunned. You can ride it now. It's no different from riding an electric bike. Hurry up. Lan Mu rushed to Taishan and cut a medium-deep scar on his chest with a knife. Under significant improvement, Taishan's muscle density has reached a quite exaggerated level. This knife only scratched the surface of the flesh, but it was also related to Lan Mu's battle with Zhongzhan Yichu 20 minutes ago. His sword is greatly compromised. Are you tickling me? Taishan looked gloomy and grabbed Lan Mu's neck, but missed. Lan Mu leaned over and raised his knife, and the next second he appeared behind the tall and thin man. His initial target was Jean, who had not joined the fight. His explosion ability is too specific to the current situation. If the road to the viaduct is blocked, then they will really fall here today. Jean obviously didn't realize that Lan Mu's target would be himself who was farthest away from him. He groaned, and the tip of the knife penetrated his abdomen. The first one. Lan Mu exhaled, pulled out the blade, and kicked Jean down with blood dripping from his mouth. What a waste. Chu Feng shrugged, not surprised that Jean fell first. The fierce fist wind has hit Lan Mu's face. It is Taishan's attack. Clang. accompanied by the severe stinging pain in his right hand. Lan Mu's arm spasmed and the long knife in his hand fell to the ground. He didn't even need to look to know that his right hand was useless. It's Chu Feng's ability. Under the interference, before Lan Mu had time to use space folding, Taishan followed up with a powerful and heavy punch, sending him flying. Lan Mu spat out a mouthful of blood with a groan. In midair, he also saw the expressionless Chu Feng turning the dagger in his hand, and his right hand, whose hand tendon had been severed, was hanging by his side. Still the same madman as before. Brother! Lan Yuan was riding on the red Simo. He was about to turn the accelerator when he saw Lan Mu's pupils shrinking as he was punched away. Her left eye instantly burned with a cluster of blazing gold. She jumped up from Simo and rushed towards Taishan, who was about to land a second punch. Feng Yi was helpless. The enemy in front of him was probably Pandora, whom Qiao had mentioned once. He looks very strong. Can't he run away first? Contractor of the gods? Feeling the heavy pressure from instinct in front of him, Taishan was stunned and turned his fist to attack Lan Yuan. Could it be that she is the person the bishop wants? But Lan Yuan seemed to have already seen through Taishan's movements and did not choose to challenge him head-on. With a deft dodge, she rolled around Lan Mu several times and left Taishan's attack range. The boy who was standing next to the motorcycle was also taken away. I don't know when Chu Feng appeared next to Feng Yi with a smile. Giving up an arm was already the biggest sacrifice he had made for this mission. He didn't want to be stupid like Jean. Ahem, didn't I ask you to take Feng Yi away? Lan Mu's face was pale and his eyes were about to burst. Don't you know how important Feng Yi's ability is to the current fairy people? But you're going to be beaten to death. Lan Mu was silent and gritted his teeth. Indeed, he is too weak. Maybe as Chu Feng said, he slacked off a lot during his time with Wuqing's home team. I am no longer the ferryman who got an S rating in the Four Seasons rating assessment trial. Blind man? Chu Feng held Feng Yi's collar with his left hand and looked at him curiously. Does the bishop want that girl who is the contractor of God? I don't know. Wouldn't it be nice to capture both of them and take them back together? Taishan scratched his head, his voice dull. Hey, are you interested in talking to yourself? Feng Yi raised his head faintly. Li Lu's influence has already made him angry enough, and now he has to be picked and picked by these people. He really thinks that he is buying cabbage at the vegetable market and getting free green onions. Chu Feng turned around in shock. The high temperature instantly burned his other left hand to a crisp. This is sequence ability? Chapter 17, Part 1. Chu Feng backed away with a gloomy expression. Does this blind man also have the ability to sequence? When did Wuqing get such a ferryman? Go away. Feng Yi said coldly. Chu Feng is in a bad mood now. He's just a blind kid with sequence abilities, and you dare to talk to him like that? The first bishop must want Lan Mu's sister. After all, she is the only divine contractor of the Wuqing ferryman. Take that girl away first. What? Taishan was startled and quickly reacted. He yelled angrily, folded his hands and made fists, and hit the girl with fierce force. Lan Yuan's expression condensed slightly. He couldn't let Taishan hit him here. Behind her, Lan Mu, who was unable to move, lay. Lan Yuan, don't confront him head-on. Lan Mu struggled to support his body. Although his sister was a contractor of the gods, her ability was the least good at fighting. The girl turned the butterfly knife in her hand, and a circle of light particles stirred up under her feet, and for a moment it seemed like she was flying through the air. As Lan Yuan's figure moved, Taishan showed a sinister smile. It seems that what Chu Feng said about the two brothers and sisters having a good relationship is true. Taishan retracted his fist as a feint, turned around suddenly, and with the inertia of his waist, he swung towards Lan Yuan's foothold behind with fierce force. Bang! Lan Yuan crossed her arms and curled up her body. Even though she was in a defensive posture in the air, this swinging fist that even caused a sonic boom sounded with the sound of cracking bones in her arms. Her body slid from the ground like a cannonball. Pass. Even if you predicted this attack, you still can't stop it. Hey, take a breath. Chu Feng scratched the white hair on the top of his head. Although Taishan's attack couldn't kill her with one hit, it could hit her hard. Next, Lan Mu could watch his sister being taken away. Just thinking about it makes him extremely excited. Damn it. Seeing this scene, Lan Mu angrily punched the ground. With his current development speed, his mental energy had been exhausted under the continuous driving of the sequence. You can no longer use space folding, even once. Lan Yuan, who fell to the ground, had an abnormal flush on his face, and then spit out a mouthful of blood. Her hands were broken. It's over. This was the first thought that came to Lan Mu's mind. Qiao's side was the first to be hit by the explosion. At the height of the 18th floor, he didn't know whether Qiao could escape. At least, there is currently no way to support them. A look of despair appeared in Lan Mu's eyes. Taishan walked over and picked up Lan Yuan. Chu Feng picked up the dagger in his hand and rushed towards Lan Mu regardless of the burning pain coming from his hand. His arrogant laughter echoed in several people's ears. I will take your lives. Chu crazy. Lan Mu's eyes were red, and he was about to pick up the knife and try space folding again. Chu Feng kicked Lan Mu hard in the face, and Lan Mu quickly curled up to protect his vitals. He smiled ferociously and stepped hard on Lan Mu's body with every kick. Brother! Lan Yuan's eyes trembled and his eyes turned red when he saw Lan Mu, who was almost unconscious after being beaten, and his face was covered in blood. Chu Feng immediately grabbed Lan Mu's hair and forced him to look up. Look, your good sister is going to be taken away by us. Lan Yuan. Lan Mu reluctantly raised his eyes, and within his scarlet sight was the girl whose arms were broken after being carried by Taishan. Don't cry, brother. I will protect you. Chu Feng sneered, turned the dagger in his hand, and stabbed Lan Mu in the head. On the viaduct filled with thick smoke, Lan Yuan's screams echoed, and the girl's eyes suddenly lit up with a blazing golden color. With the ancient atmosphere rising, Taishan, who was carrying her, changed his expression. The next second, a brilliant sword light with blazing flames was reflected in Lan Yuan's golden pupils, cutting through the vast night. Chu Feng's right hand was instantly cut off. Fang Yi. Lan Yuan murmured in disbelief, and the golden color in his pupils slowly dissipated. When did he become a sequencer? The young man put on his sunglasses and let out a sigh of relief. At this moment, strange dark lines of thorns slowly appeared on his lower back. Along his back, he climbed up with claws and teeth. I almost forgot that there was a blind ferryman present. Chu Feng covered his severed arm that was instantly scorched, but no blood flowed out, with a gloomy look on his face. Do you still have the ability to fight? Taishan smiled, his words filled with ridicule. Before the Chu mania attack, a wave of high temperature swept across the door between the two of them, and the air between their noses instantly became much drier. Seeing the flaming blade approaching right in front of him, Taishan subconsciously let go of Lan Yuan and raised his hand to block. His arm went numb, and he felt a severe burning and tingling sensation. Although he did not end up with the same fate as Chu Feng, the large pieces of burned and scorched flesh made his face suddenly look unsightly. There is no end to these ferrymen. It's all because the gold died too quickly and they faced a 2v3 situation. Otherwise, the battle would have been over long ago. Is he really blind? Looking at Fang Yi, who decisively carried Lan Yuan on his back and jumped back, Chu Feng was shocked and confused. When did you obtain the sequence ability? It seems that I awakened at that time at Lisa Girl's school. Fang Yi put down Lan Yuan and said softly. This was the perfect time to reveal the fact that he had awakened. But you can't see it. To deal with Pandora and these two people is still... Lan Yuan muttered. You take Lan Mu and escape first. Fang Yi said and waved his sword again. He also wanted to try to see how much strength he could exert on his own. Xiao Fang is a sequencer. Lan Mu raised his head with difficulty, looking at the back of the young man who was fighting with Chu Feng in front of him, and his heart was filled with excitement. Lan Yuan, he can't beat him. You two should leave quickly. I can't leave. Lan Yuan felt bitter in his heart. Seeing Fang Ye's wild swing of the sword, Chu Feng's heart calmed down and he burst into laughter. I'm just saying, how strong a blind man can be is just a matter of good luck. Lan Mu's eyes turned red as he looked at the two men playing with Fang Yi in their hands. I must kill them. It seems that I have almost adapted to it. Fang Yi wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth, weighed the knife that originally belonged to Lan Mu in his hand, and muttered to himself. The dark pattern that exists on him, similar to that of the divine contractor, seems to be able to exert more powerful power when applied to ordinary sequences. It feels a bit like an ordinary vehicle with a sports car engine. He stood there and lowered the knife in his hand. What, have you given up? I haven't had enough fun yet. Chu Feng turned the dagger in his hand with a gloomy look. How dare you cut off Fang Ye's arm while he's not paying attention? He must remove Fang Ye's limbs one by one. Chu Feng suddenly laughed. Behind Fang Yi, Taishan had already raised the severely deformed taxi high and smashed it towards Fang Yi. It's over. Lan Mu's eyes were gray. With this distance and the size of the car, even if Fang Yi was reminded, he couldn't avoid it. Fang Yi also smiled. At this moment, the black and red thorns on his back gradually spread until they covered half of his body, becoming extremely hot with the influx of spiritual power. And his strength at this moment has reached the peak that it can bear. Several people on the viaduct only felt that the temperature around them suddenly increased. Haitian Ci, Lan Mu, and Lan Yuan were intercepted on the viaduct. We are on our way there now. The scorching wind blew into the car. Ah Huan pointed his finger not far away and exclaimed, Uncle Qiao, look.
What?
Qiao raised his eyes and looked out the window, his pupils shrinking. On the viaduct, a blazing orange flame pillar looks like a fire dragon, roaring from the bridge, straight to the sky. It even illuminated the 100-foot-tall dark prison gate in the city center. Chapter 18, Part 1. but the flame pillar only lasted for a brief 3 seconds before disappearing in the dark night. Whose sequence ability is that? Huan was surprised. Xiao took a deep breath. If I'm not mistaken, this is Li Lu's number 199, Scorching Heat. How is it possible? What stage of scorching heat does this have to be to have such exaggerated energy? I don't know. We'll find out when we get there. Zhou stepped on the accelerator again. Inside a hospital in Wuching, Suan held the medical record in his hand, stood up tremblingly, stared blankly at the pillar of fire in the distance outside the window that dyed most of the night red, and knelt on the ground with a feverish expression. On the viaduct, most of Taishan's body was charred and black, and he fell to the ground dully, his life or death uncertain. This blind man is too weird. Something is wrong. Chu Feng was completely stunned. The moment the deformed taxi hit Fang Yi, it was melted out of thin air by the red pillar of fire that erupted from his body. Disappear. If he hadn't been far away, he would have been swept in by the terrifying high temperature. Lan Mu couldn't help coughing and slowly moved away the clothes covering himself and Lan Yuan. Now, even his breathing was in burning pain. However, this fire ability feels a bit familiar. What's going on? Lan Yuan can't figure out the current situation. Why can Fang Yi, a newly awakened sequencer, erupt with such exaggerated energy fluctuations? I don't know. Lan Mu shook his head in confusion. Where Fang Yi stood, the asphalt on the bridge had melted. Only one was solved? Fang Yi frowned, and a strong feeling of dizziness and nausea came to his heart. This is the first time he has tried to use the so-called dark patterns of gods to stimulate ordinary sequence abilities. He was holding the knife and suddenly felt a little unsteady on his feet. It turns out that this is the end of a powerful battle. Chu Feng keenly observed Fang Yi's current situation and felt relieved. The power of the pillar of fire seemed exaggerated, but it should have overdrawn all his mental power. I won. Seeing the crazy look in Chu Feng's eyes, Lan Mu's pupil shrank. Fang Yi, be careful. He's going to activate injury sharing again. What? Fang Yi frowned. This Chu Feng's ability is really rogue. This ability can actually be activated twice a day. Die to me. Chu Feng shouted arrogantly. This was the limit he broke through after reaching the 30% development level in the second stage. Suddenly, a heavy punch hit Chu Feng's right face, interrupting the energy dissipation of his injury sharing. The fist wind carried the remaining strength and knocked him against the railing behind him. Chu Feng instantly spat out several bloody broken teeth from his mouth. Fortunately, we arrived. Zhou turned his wrists expressionlessly and unbuttoned the 2 buttons on the front of his shirt, revealing his well-defined chest muscles. After Lan Mu breathed a sigh of relief, his vision went dark. Finally, he could no longer hold on and fainted. Zhou arrived. Tarzan, who was lying behind and was covered in black, roared angrily and locked Xiao's neck from behind, trying to strangle his throat directly. Fang Yi squinted his eyes and saw an extra injection where Taishan originally lay. Significantly improved? This form of fighting is somewhat similar to my invincibility. Xiao's body sank, a hardened silver light glowed on his body, and then he raised his elbow and hit Taishan's lower ribs hard, with fighting skills and invincible characteristics. Instantly broke 3 of Taishan's ribs. As Zhou turned around, he accurately hit Tarzan on the back of the jaw with an uppercut. The tall, bear-like man spat out a mouthful of blood mist. He fell straight to the ground, lifeless. On one side, Huan, who was holding Lan Yuan with his left hand and holding Lan Mu with his right hand, stared at his eyes with thick dark circles and looked at Xiao, who was in a moment of endless glory. I felt something was wrong, but I couldn't explain why. His tall figure enveloped Chu Feng, who was holding the railing with a cold expression. Pandora, besides you 3, who else came to Wuching? Do you think I can say it? Chu Feng's face gradually turned crazy, and the dagger stabbing his belly was grabbed by Xiao. Uncle Xiao, be careful, Lan Yuan exclaimed. Looking at Chu Feng with a smile on his face, Xiao suddenly felt something bad in his heart and kicked him away while raising his arms to protect his face. Bang! The dagger caused a violent explosion between Xiao and Chu Feng. Looking at the rapidly changing situation on the field, several people's faces were full of surprise. As the flames of the explosion dissipated, Xiao's figure became distorted, and when he reappeared, he was at the other end. Ahem, I'm fine. Zhou's blonde hair was messy, and his face was stained with traces of gunpowder smoke. Fortunately, on the way, he told Huan to be careful at all times to avoid accidents. Sure enough, looking at Chu Feng and Jean who had disappeared on the viaduct, Xiao looked sulky. That explosion sequencer is in a state of suspended animation. Huan frowned. How to deal with this stupid big guy? Burn. Xiao turned to look at Lan Mu and Lan Yuan, who looked miserable, with a guilty look on his face. I'm late this time. Don't worry, he's not dead yet. Lan Yuan gave a forced smile. But what happened to that pillar of fire? Xiao frowned. Fang Yi awakened at Lisa Girls' School and was selected by Scorching. Until now, Lan Yuan still couldn't believe what he saw. What? Huan was startled, and his eyes suddenly turned red. Li Lu's ability chose Fang Yi? Then how could such an exaggerated power be unleashed? This is far beyond the strength of the first stage of development. I don't know myself. Maybe the small universe exploded in a hurry? Fang Yi was vague. Is the intensity of the sequence really related to the degree of belief? Xiao rubbed his chin and thought, otherwise this situation would really be unexplainable. My head hurts. Fang Ye's face was pale, his steps were shaky, and he was about to fall to the ground. But Xiao held him up. Although there are elements of pretending, it is indeed true. Don't worry about this problem anymore. Huan, and I will take you to treatment. After making the decision, Xiao dialed the phone in his hand. Etc. What's wrong? Xiao was stunned. I won't go for treatment. In addition to mental exhaustion, there are only some superficial injuries. After all, if you don't go home, my mother will call the police. Okay, then I'll ask someone to take you home. If you feel uncomfortable, please contact me anytime. Xiao answered the phone. Hey, I'm Xiao from the Zhuhua department. The Wuqing home team was attacked by Pandora members on the viaduct. I've sent you the location. This time, I owe you. Lan Yuan walked up to Fang Yi tremblingly, with complicated eyes. If Fang Yi hadn't suddenly awakened and hindered their attack, she didn't even dare to think about what would have happened. Good luck. Fang Yi waved his hand. However, I discovered something. What? Several people looked at Fang Yi. My eyes seem to have regained their sight. Chapter 19, Part 1. Fang Yi looked sneaky and made a slight sound as the key entered the lock cylinder. Squeak after opening the door and seeing the darkness in the living room. He immediately breathed a sigh of relief and tiptoed towards the room. Where have you been? The sound coming from the living room made Fang Yi feel scared, and all 3 souls and 6 souls were suddenly missing. Even though he saw so many powerful scenes at Lisa Girls' School, he was not frightened like this. Oh, Mom, you scared me to death. You kid, you ran away somewhere so late, and you blame me for scaring you. As the lights came on, Fang's mother was sitting on the sofa, wearing a plaid shawl, looking angry and funny. She was stunned when she saw Fang Ye's face full of hurt. Did you get into a fight with someone? No, I accidentally missed the mark. Fang Yi felt guilty for a while, and subconsciously touched his earlobe. How could you be so careless? Fang Ma sighed and turned around to dig through the medicine box. As the alcohol stung his face, Fang Yi bared his teeth and said, No, Mom, I can do it myself. Okay. Fang Ma gathered her shawl and stood up. Are you hungry? Fang Yi nodded like a chicken pecking at rice. Eating scallion oil and egg noodles? I knew Mom was the best. You kid, you are becoming more and more glib. By the way, Mom, my eyes are healed. Fang's mother stopped at the door of the kitchen and turned around with trembling shoulders. What did you say? Fang Ye's hand holding the alcohol bottle froze, and he said with a serious face, I can see it. Really? Fang Ma was dubious. Oops. Fang Yi scratched his head, put down the guide stick and took out a recovery diagnosis certificate from his bag. Well, this is the diagnosis result from the hospital today. It was still a little vague a few days ago, so I didn't say anything about it. Fang Ma grabbed the medical certificate and read it carefully. Snap. Snap. Tears spread on the paper. The woman who had been strong in front of Fang Yi for 3 years finally burst into tears at this moment. Fang Ye's nose felt sour. He stood up and patted her back, feeling infinite guilt in his heart. Mother Fang smiled and wiped away her tears. I'm going to feed you now. Good. A warm yellow light soon filled the small kitchen. After Fang Yi took a shower and treated his wounds, he lay on the bed and thought about everything that happened today. He felt as if he had been run over by a large truck, and his whole body was in great pain. An hour ago, after he told everyone in the Wuqing team that his eyesight had returned, although their reactions were shocked, they didn't show much. After all, the physique of sequencers is completely different from that of ordinary people. If you are not born blind but have some kind of eye disease, recovery is indeed possible. At present, he has a guess that a method like his that can rob the dying person's sequence ability is unheard of for the ferryman. So they had no way to verify and know where to start. Until now, I can be considered successful in joining the ferryman organization. Fang Yi took off the black contact lenses on his eyes and stared at his own pair of red cross eyes in the mirror. He didn't know how long it took before he fell asleep. Tonight, he didn't sleep well. It wasn't until he woke up that he learned a piece of news that was neither good nor bad. The news is that the viaduct rose from his body last night, and the pillar of fire connecting the sky and the earth was featured on the local news in Wuqing. Title: A strange spectacle appears on the viaduct in Wuqing in the evening. The scene is shocking. Looking at the heated discussion in the comment area, Fang Yi sighed. I hope no one can follow this news and find him. After all, fake news abounds. In the early years, it was not uncommon for cancer to heal itself, and to lift a large truck with bare hands. Besides, the ferryman should be able to handle this aspect well. At that time, I was only thinking about testing my abilities, but I didn't expect that it would cause such a big commotion. It had been a week since their last meeting. Fong Yi was pulled into a group chat called Mickey's Bedroom. It has to be said that the physique of sequencers is indeed different from ordinary people. Or maybe they had other treatment methods. Within 3 days, the two people who looked miserable at the time were alive and kicking again. In addition to Lan Mu sharing his daily life in college, as well as a Huan and Taro's hair's shopping information, if Fong Yi didn't know the identities of these people, he would even have the illusion that they have more than 3 or 5 friends. Fong Yi tapped his index finger on the frame of his phone, looking hesitant. Fong Yi, how are you guys doing? At Cosmos' invincible enemy is a handsome guy who is loved by everyone. Lan Mu, T Fong Yi, speak in human language. Lan Mu, convex convex Taro. Fong Yi, by the way, have you found Chuing? Xiao. She has been registered as a missing person by the police and will be handed over to Yuandong Department for investigation. Yuandong? Is it named after the Four Seasons? It should be another department responsible for other matters. The ferryman organization is quite detailed. Lan Yuan, Lan Mu, ride over and buy 2 cups of moonbuck for Taro and I. The delivery fee is too expensive. Lan Mu? Looking at the two of them, there was an extremely ugly frog with red lips and a smiling panda with a human face. Fong Yi turned off the screen speechlessly. Dong dong. Someone knocking on the door? Fong Yi got up and walked to the entrance. After opening the door, his expression suddenly darkened. What are you here for? The uninvited guest standing at the door turned out to be his uncle, Li Weigua. When Li Weigua saw Fong Yi, he looked startled at first and pushed him away with a sneer. Where is your mother? I have something to do with her. Before he could take a few steps forward, he was pulled back by Fong Yi, staggering and almost falling. What are you here for? I'm looking for money from your mother. She hasn't given me the money she should give me yet. Fong Ye's eyes were cold. Why did she give you money? I lost money starting my business. This is called investing. So get out of here, you little brat. Fong Yi suddenly smiled. Is 30,000 enough? Fong Yi took out his cell phone and shook it. The 50,000 yuan in his bank card was the compensation the ferryman organization paid him because of the incident at the hospital. What? Where did you get the money? Li Weigua stared at the balance with a strong look of greed. It's barely enough. Come over to me first. Fong Yi took back his phone and said, kneel down and I'll give it to you. This is an investment. I will share the profits with you when the time comes. Li Weigua gritted his teeth, but his eyes never left Fong Ye's mobile phone. Investment has losses and gains. If you kneel down, I won't ask you for any losses. How about that? Li Weigua thought for a moment with a gloomy expression and looked inside the room. Are you sure? Yeah. Fong Yi laughed mockingly. Li Weigua cursed and pulled the carpet in front of the door and knelt on the ground without hesitation. The knees parted as soon as they touched. It's okay now. Chapter 20, Part 1. Ha 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 ha. Fong Yi laughed until he bent over. That's it? Li Weigua patted his knee with an unlucky look on his face, looking extremely excited. Hurry up and transfer the money to me. With this money, he can buy more bags for his little girlfriend. As long as she is happy, he can naturally coax her to get married. Oh, you can go away. Fong Yi suddenly retracted his smile as if his face changed. What? Li Weigua's face changed drastically. His eyes turned red. Are you kidding me? Since you have knelt down for me, then think of it as giving me a valuable experience and lesson to my grandson. Fong Yi patted his face with a smile. You blind man really takes himself seriously. Your mother wanted to sell the house to cure you. A blind man, and I haven't agreed yet. Li Weigua looked at Fong Ye's back and roared, then rushed forward and punched him hard. To him, Fong Yi seemed to have eyes on his back. He turned around and stretched out his hand to directly hold Li Weigua's fist. Then a straight punch hit Li Weigua's big face full of stubble. Ah, you dare to hit me? Li Weigua screamed and fell to the ground. Feeling the burning pain on his face and the dizziness in his brain, he looked in disbelief. Are your eyes healed? Disappointed? Fong Yi smiled coldly. He leaned over and grabbed his collar expressionlessly. Immediately afterwards, Li Weigua was kicked unconscious with an unrestrained kick. Fong Yi took him out of the door, threw him in the corridor, and slowly patted the dust on his palms. Then he raised his head and smiled at the stunned Lan Yuan, who was squatting on the tree outside the corridor window. He stretched out his hand to say hello, then turned around and returned to the room. Who's here? Why is there so much noise? Fong's mother opened the kitchen door and wiped the water stains on her hands. I don't know. Maybe a dog was barking in the corridor. Fong Yi shrugged. Oh, look at it. My kitchen pressure cooker is still steaming something. Good. By the way, Mom, can I see it? I dropped out of school before. Now it seems I can go back to school again. Standing outside Fong Ye's house, Lan Yuan's eyes moved as he looked worried at the unconscious Li Weigua. Wuching Experimental High School. Fang Ye's mother, don't worry. With Fang Ye's previous performance as the school's student representative, she can keep up with everyone without repeating a grade. That's good, that's good. I can only ask teacher to take good care of me. This is what we should do as teachers. Calm down, students. Let us warmly welcome Fang Yi, who has returned to school after recovering from illness. What a touching example of a young man who was blind from an eye disease and successfully recovered. This indomitable spirit and courage to fight against the disease is worth learning from. Lao Ban was impassioned and looked at Fang Yi with eyes full of admiration. Fang Yi staggered as he walked into the classroom. What the hell? Even the teacher was poisoned. Sure enough, no matter what kind of difficulties a student with excellent grades and noble character may encounter, he cannot be defeated. This spirit can not only be used in our lives, but also in study. Learning is like mountains. As long as everyone has the courage to climb. Teacher, just wait a minute. Fang Yi secretly tugged at the corner of his old classmate's clothes, his expression helpless. Why was it still the same as before? He couldn't stop talking. What's wrong, Fang Yi-san? Can you find a place for me to sit down? Fang Yi said expressionlessly. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm so excited. Just over there. Lao Ban waved his hand and pointed to the seat by the window. In addition to Fang Yi, who has returned to school, there are 2 new transfer students in our class today. A warm welcome to everyone. With bursts of wows and warm applause, Fang Yi, who had not yet reached his seat, turned around in shock. One of the transfer students turned out to be Lan Yuan. The girl wearing a white shirt and gray pleated skirt is slim, with a pair of cold phoenix eyes under her smooth black hair and a touch of advanced world weariness on her beautiful face. Another red-haired girl was full of excitement. She had a pretty face and was dressed as a hot girl. She stood carelessly on the podium and kept blowing kisses to the classmates in the audience. Looking at the red-haired girl, the old classmate's eyebrows ache. It's over. She is another problem student. Just by standing there, she had already violated 800 school rules. After class, she must be called to the office to educate her. Damn, they're so pretty, aren't they? 5:55. I finally have such a good-looking classmate. I'll ask for their contact information after class is over. Ahem, new classmates, please introduce yourself first. The old class stared at the students below, trying to suppress them with momentum. You guys have no reaction to such an inspiring young man like Fang Yi. If you don't learn well every day, you will get rid of these unhealthy tendencies. Everyone can just call me Taro. My name is Lan Yuan. The girl said very little, and while turning her eyes, she pointed her finger at Fang Yi. I'm going to sit next to him. Chung Shui looked at the girl standing on the stage and opened her mouth. She knew that Xiaoye was going to resume school. But why is his distant cousin here too? Still in the same class? The class was instantly in an uproar. No way. The transfer student knows Fang Yi? Look at Fang Ye's expression. How is that possible? He must be in a better position. Oh, I want to sit with the beautiful transfer student too. There happens to be a vacant seat. Okay, you can come over. Lao Ban looked at Lan Yuan suspiciously. No, these 2 people are incompatible with each other. Oops, I am the class teacher. How could I accidentally be led into gossip by these students? Lao Ban quickly concealed his imperceptible embarrassment. Stop talking. Take out your books and go to class. What we are going to study today is, take us to the cafeteria to eat. As the bell rang, Taro stood in front of Fang Yi at some point and tapped his desk lightly with his fingers. Do I know you well? You Lan Yuan, look at him. Feeling the strange looks around him, Fang Yi stood up helplessly. Soon, the 3 of them were sitting in the school cafeteria. Why are you 2 here too? What's wrong? Don't I look like a high school girl? Taro blinked. Of course it's to protect you. Lan Yuan tucked his black hair, which was messed up by the big fan in the cafeteria, behind his ears. I'm already a sequencer. Why do I need your protection? Fang Yi rubbed his temples. But yesterday, I asked someone to carry your uncle away for you. Oh, thank you very much. Lan Yuan rolled his eyes when he heard this. Xiaoye, cousin, why did you transfer to our class? Chung Shui held the food plate and naturally sat down next to Fang Yi, with a confused look on her face. Cousin? Taro looked at Fang Yi and then at Lan Yuan, with a confused look on his face. Where is the cousin from? Now Lan Yuan's eyes were as murderous, and Fang Yi could no longer pretend not to see it. He shifted his gaze awkwardly. I haven't eaten the food in the cafeteria for a long time. It's so delicious. Hello, cousin, we will be classmates from now on. Chung Shui smiled and waved to Lan Yuan. Snap! The chopsticks in Lan Yuan's hand broke at the sound, and he gave a smile that was uglier than crying. Hello? Puff! Taro squirted out a mouthful of water. Chapter 21, Part 1. Hello, Xiaofeng. How was your first day of school? Hearing this male voice, Fang Yi, who was finishing his first day back at school, stiffened and slowly turned around. In front of him, there was a handsome young man lying on his bed, even wearing shoes. Lan Mu? Get off here. Lan Mu reluctantly sat upright from Fang Ye's bed. Oh, don't be so cruel. It was all thanks to you that day. But from today on, we can be considered a family. Hearing Lan Mu's shameless words, Fang Yi twitched the corner of his mouth. Why did you suddenly show up at my house? How did you get in? Oh, let me come over to see how my sister is doing as your guard. My ability is sequence number 89, space folding. Have you forgotten? 555 is so sad. Fang Yi had no expression on his face. Such a small reaction? Don't you think my rustling teleportation that day was very cool? Lan Mu's eyes widened. Very handsome. Now you can use your ability to leave. Fang Yi issued the eviction order. He guessed right. Lan Mu really seemed to be in a bad mood. Early next morning, as the school bell rang, Lan Yuan and Taro arrived belatedly. Lan Yuan expressionlessly stuffed a black gold card into Fang Ye's arms, as if stuffing a tip. Uncle Qiao asked me to give it to you. The eyes of the students who were closer to them suddenly shot over like searchlights. Crown Plaza Hotel? Several male students who came over out of curiosity couldn't help shouting, and couldn't help but glance at Lan Yuan's extremely beautiful side face. Looking at the small words engraved on the card, Fang Ye's face suddenly darkened. No, couldn't you just give it to me secretly? Then, isn't that a 5-star hotel? Holy shit, you kid, you're so jealous of me. Damn it, where did I lose? Fang Yi is so thin. How can he be manly? Look at me. Lan Yuan, I'm right behind you. Regarding the fact that the new transfer student gave Fang Yi a room card, countless rumors were instantly compiled and spread all over the class. High debt. Selling your body just to cure your illness. The story that the blind boy and the rich woman had to tell. In those days, everyone looked at Fang Yi with a bit of sympathy. Even more people talked to him than before, and even patted him on the shoulder. He was young and should be careful. Lan Yuan ignored it, and still went her own way. Anyway, her mission was completed. Since the last attack on the viaduct, there has been no news from Qiao and Teamshin for almost a month. Lan Yuan and Taro seem to have turned into ordinary female high school students, going to and from school normally, looking very peaceful. They seem to be enjoying this rare and peaceful life for them. Before class, let me announce the ranking of the results of the quiz the day before yesterday. The old classman walked into the classroom with a stack of test papers on his face. Suddenly there was a sigh from below, and everyone's face was gloomy. After I took the test, I got the answers right with the top students. It was outrageous. There were only a few answers that were the same. The first and second place finishers this time should be Cheng Shui and Zhang Qiuza. Quiet. Although the test paper this time is more difficult, we still have students in our class who got the highest scores in the school. The old class member patted the table and glanced at the students below. The students in the class immediately started whispering, and the boy with a handsome face and silver-rimmed glasses sitting in the front row immediately pushed up his glasses and raised an imperceptible smile at the corner of his mouth. Although the questions in this paper were very tricky, some of the key questions happened to match the questions he had stayed up all night studying. The first place belongs to him. Now, Cheng Shui, as the class goddess, should finally cast her eyes on him. Even though the two beautiful girls Lan Yuan and Yu Tu were transferred into his class, they still did not shake Cheng Shui's position in his mind. After all, Cheng Shui has a gentle and generous personality, and her appearance is also the type he likes. Their names are often competing for the first or second place in the performance rankings. I have to say, he and I are a match made in heaven. The old classmate's face glowed red, and his saliva sprayed all over the faces of the classmates in the front row. First place, Fang Yi. Everyone applauds. This time, the average grade of their class suddenly jumped up a lot, which made her feel proud in front of other teachers. What? Zhang Qiuza's eyes almost dropped. Didn't Fang Yi take a year off from school? Second place, Taro. It's easy to win. Taro stood up and cheered. This completed the agreement with Lao Ban, and she no longer had to dye her hair back. At this moment, Zhang Qiuza was not at all calm. He slapped the table and stood up. Teacher Lin, did you make a mistake in the ranking this time? Classmate Zhang, don't get excited. I'm not the only one marking papers this time. Lao Ban frowned. Could it be that the two of them cheated? One dropped out of school right after he entered school, and the other slept in class every day. How could he get the top 2 spots? Zhang Qiuza took a deep breath and calmly expressed his judgment. Zhang Qiuza, I discussed Fang Ye's problem-solving ideas with other senior teachers, and all I can say is that he only got full marks because the paper only had 150 points. And Mr. Taro's problem-solving ideas can be called a textbook template, precise and meticulous, without any mistakes. This school exam is a test paper compiled by our school itself, and the school is monitored everywhere, so there is no possibility of cheating. It was rare for her to explain a long paragraph to a student. After all, Zhang Qiuza was also the monitor she once valued. She also didn't want Zhang Qiuza to ruin her mentality because of this exam. Zhang Qiuza's face suddenly turned red after he keenly caught a hint of disappointment in Lao Ban's eyes. Zhang Qiuza, you are the third one. He was not very happy when he heard that, and sat down with a dejected look on his face. Fourth place, Cheng Shui. Fifth place. The sunshine that is about to set is soft, making people feel a lot warmer all over. The air is filled with the aroma of food from food vendors outside the school. The results happened to be announced today, but Lan Yuan didn't know what task he was going to perform, so he asked for leave. Uncle Qiao was going to be fussing a lot when he saw Lan Yuan's score. Tao Tu sighed while taking Lan Yuan's grade list, which ranked 53rd. There were only 54 students in the class, and there were a student broke his leg after falling and had no reference. Taro reasonably suspects that Lan Yuan is a beautiful vase, but she doesn't look stupid either. Oh no. Cheng Shui stopped beside the two of them panting, her cheeks flushed, and the girl's soft facial features looked fair and delicate in the sunset. What's wrong? Why did Lan Yuan ask for leave today? Cheng Shui blinked. Lan Yuan? Her brother got into a car accident while driving with her. Taro ignored Fong Ye's weird look and started talking nonsense. But what a surprise. I didn't expect that Mr. Taro is also a hidden academic master. Cheng Shui laughed at herself. It seems that my position in the top 3 is not guaranteed in the future. No way. Taro smiled happily. When she saw Cheng Shui, she couldn't help but think of Lan Yuan's frustrated expression when he was called cousin. Although Lan Yuan explained to her later, he still became the butt of laughter between the two of them. Then, are you going to visit them now? Yeah. Xiaoya, can you make some time for me? I have something to say to you. Cheng Shui's expression suddenly became cautious. The Taro pupils on one side were shaking. Could this be that one? Chapter 22, Part 1. Then I'll leave first. I'll see you later, Fong Yi. It's okay if you don't see me. Taro waved his hand, nervously took out his mobile phone and started typing, and left with a quick step. She doesn't want to be a big light bulb. Looking at Taro's back, Fong Yi twitched the corner of his mouth and walked away without hesitation. When you go to visit a patient, you should bring comforting gifts. There happens to be a flower shop near the school that is very good at wrapping flowers. The owner is also very nice. I'll tell you on the way. Why are you talking weird today? You weren't like this before. Fong Yi smiled. No way. Cheng Shui looked happy and spoke briskly. The two people chatting and laughing outside the school gate quickly disappeared around the corner, and Zhang Qiuza's face suddenly darkened behind him. Obviously the first place is his. Why? It was obvious that he should be standing next to Cheng Shui. Originally, he had always been dismissive of gossip in the class. But now, he even began to suspect that Lan Yuan used her financial ability to bribe those teachers. And that Taro. He must find evidence that these three people are collaborating. Cheng Shui danced briskly and looked back at him. Classmate Fong Yi. I wonder if you still have an impression of Huo Miaoqiu? Well, I remember. What's wrong? Fong Yi was slightly silent. This was when Fong's mother couldn't get a penny. She heard from her colleagues that this platform could raise funds, so she applied. We have been raising funds for a long time, but we have not raised 10,000 yuan. One day, an anonymous person suddenly donated nearly 200,000 yuan on this platform. Li Weigua even had a big fight with Fong's mother because of this money. Fong Yi and Fong's mother searched for the anonymous person for a long time, but they never found who it was, and they couldn't remember any relatives around them who would help them. As Fong Yi recovered, too many things happened after that, and the matter was dismissed. Wait, Fong Yi suddenly stopped, his expression trembling. Is it you? Only he, Fong Ma, and Li Weigua knew about Huo Miaoqiu. Cheng Shui waved her hands in panic. I don't want to take credit for donating money. Don't get me wrong. Besides, it's not my fault alone. It's really you? Why have you never mentioned it? Fong Yi suddenly grabbed Cheng Shui's thin shoulders, and the latter's face suddenly turned crimson, and he stared at the young man in front of him without blinking. He didn't let me say it. Cheng Shui murmured. Taro, who was hiding behind the telephone pole, opened his mouth wide. Although he didn't know what the two said in this minute, but this progress was too fast. Fong Yi doesn't look like someone who would be attracted to women. She and Lan Yuan usually hang out in front of him every day, but they don't see any reaction from him. Group chat from Mickey's bedroom. Taro, it's over. Fong Yi, the youngest among us, is about to fall. Lan Mu, I fell in love when I was underage. I killed someone. I'm still single. Lan Yuan? Huan. After I make money, I will definitely return it to you. I didn't mean to ask you to pay it back. Cheng Shui blushed. Don't you want to know why? Fong Yi was stunned. He really didn't know and didn't think about it at all. I knew you had forgotten. Cheng Shui sighed softly. Do you still remember Haiten? Fong Yi tried hard to recall for a while, and a big boy whose face turned dark every day emerged in his mind. At that time, Fong Yi played with him every day and spent a very happy childhood. However, everyone moved after entering junior high school. There were no cell phones at that time, so there was no contact information. However, he remembered that the black charcoal conditions were very good, and his mother said it seemed that he had gone abroad to study. 2/3 of Hua Miao's 200,000 yuan was paid by Haitan. After learning that you were sick, Haitan took a lot of effort to contact me. However, his name is Yixing. If he knew that we still call him Heitan, he would be very angry. Fang Yi didn't expect that his childhood friend would do so many things for him without his knowledge. If only he had known earlier. Do you have Yixing's contact information? I haven't gotten up yet while I'm abroad. Besides, you don't even have my contact information. How can I send it to you? Cheng Shui said. Thank you very much, I'm sorry. Fang Yi looked guilty. Looking at Fang Ye's appearance, Cheng Shui put her hands on her hips angrily. Don't say sorry. Just treat us to dinner as soon as Yixing returns home. Nothing is as pleasant as saying it in person. Luckily you recovered. Otherwise, you don't know how sad Yixing would be. He would always want to beat you back. Fang Yi laughed. There will definitely be a chance. The two of them quickly walked to the flower shop Cheng Shui mentioned. Just through the floor-to-ceiling glass windows, they could see clusters of flowers inside. The layout is simple and fresh, with an old-fashioned bicycle placed at the door. Floating life? Fang Yi raised his head and glanced at the name of the store. As soon as he stepped into the store, he smelled a rich and mellow coffee aroma. It's indeed a good place. Do you come here often? Fang Yi looked at the store curiously. Sister Zhu is very nice. Even if I don't buy flowers, I often come here to chat with her. Cheng Shui pursed her lips and smiled. Sure enough, it was the right time to choose this moment to tell Fang Yehua Miaochu about it. Since knowing this, Fang Yi seems to have returned to the past for a short time, and he talks a lot more than before. Before Fang Yi could respond, a delicate and charming woman came forward. She is wearing a hip-hugging long skirt. Her long, fluffy chestnut curly hair is tied behind her back. She wears heavy makeup and light makeup, and her appearance is beautiful and very attractive. Oh, Xiaox Sui, I haven't been to the store for a long time. Are you bringing your boyfriend with you this time? No, Sister Zhu. He is my good friend. Cheng Shui's face turned red, and she hurriedly waved her hands to deny it. Sister Zhu smiled ambiguously. What flowers do you want to pick today? I have a lot of new beautiful roses of different colors here. Oh, Sister Zhu, stop making fun of me. I'm visiting an injured friend. You can just pick it up in the flower room and wrap it up for me. Can I go into the flower room and have a look together? Cheng Shui was shocked when she heard Fang Ye's words, and her face suddenly became embarrassed. As far as she knew, Sister Zhu never allowed any guest to enter her flower room, but it was her fault for not making it clear in advance. We won't wait too long outside, she explained hurriedly. Fang Yi didn't know what happened to him, but he said this sentence by mistake, because he always felt that in Sister Zhu's flower shop, in addition to the aroma of coffee that filled the room, there was also a hint of strange and familiar smell. He wanted to confirm it, but there was no other way. It's okay, then you can come together. Sister Zhu gave Fang Yi a deep look. Looking at the woman swaying back, Fang Yi took a deep breath and strode to follow her into the greenhouse. The shocked sight of Cheng Shui behind him was isolated as the door slowly closed. Chapter 23, Part 1. In the flower room, the seemingly small space of the store is actually unique inside. In such a large space, a sea of magnificent flowers seem to have been splashed on the ground by countless buckets of paint. The colors are vibrant and gorgeous, and the scenery is romantic and psychedelic. Fang Yi opened his mouth wide. Even though there was an unidentified woman standing in front of him, his heart was severely impacted by this scene. At the same time, he also realized that this was definitely not a scene produced by natural cultivation. These flowers are not suitable for the season, the cultivation environment, and this place. Does it look good? Sister Zhu pursed her lips and turned to look at him. This is the first time in my life that I have seen such a beautiful sea of flowers. Fang Yi told the truth. Hearing his frank answer, Sister Zhu laughed so much that her whole body trembled, and her narrow peach blossom eyes slightly narrowed to observe the young man in front of her. I really like your answer. However, you seem to be more perceptive than other sequencers. Hearing these words, Fang Ye's expression suddenly changed. His eyes flickered, and he could basically rule out from Sister Zhu's tone that she was not a sequencer. You are indeed an E. There is actually a sequencer's evil that can be discovered without going through the door and energy fluctuations. It seems that the information Xiao and the others have is limited. Sister Zhu answered the question. Life is as gorgeous as summer flowers, and death is as quiet and beautiful as autumn leaves. This is a poem I like very much. My current life is just a choice I make based on my own understanding. I believe it is the same for you. Fang Yi suddenly remembered that Cheng Shui said that the two had a good personal relationship, and his heart suddenly became cold. He did not believe in these evil tricks. Beasts disguised as humans would eventually show their fangs. What is your purpose? Are you worried about the safety of Shui's child now? Fang Ye's expression was stern, and when he met Sister Zhu's eyes, The cold and sticky feeling of death seemed to be a snake climbing up Fang Ye's back, making the hairs on his body stand up. Even the nurse and chewing never gave him such a clear and strong feeling of death. There was no time to use any ability, whether it was scorching heat or the ferryman's eyes. If he takes action, he will be killed instantly. This was Fang Ye's first instinct. You are strong. Fang Ye relaxed his tense body and sighed quietly. He is not without self-awareness. Don't be nervous, I'm just making a little joke. This kid's Ioxway is quite interesting. Sister Zhu covered her mouth and smiled. She didn't know when she had already wrapped 2 bouquets of carnations. She approached Fang Ye and exhaled like a orchid. It's interesting, you seem different. Fang Ye was startled and took a few steps back. Sister Zhu was not annoyed, but looked at Fang Ye with interest. Your eyes actually belong to the dark world. How do you know? His expression was uncertain, but this he was actually able to reveal his hidden identity in one word. Of course it won't work for me to cover it up with clumsy means, but it's normal that you can't control these eyes now. But this is not a good job. Sister Zhu's unclear words made Fang Ye frown. Can I ask, what level of E are you? If we look at it according to the standards set by your ferryman, I should be with special combat power. Sister Zhu did not shy away from this, with a calm expression. Special battle? Fang Ye's pupil shrank sharply. This may be the strongest misfortune he has ever encountered so far. Definitely better than Suin by more than one level. There are so many monsters hiding in the small city of Wu. No wonder Wuqing was recorded as a Class A war zone by the ferryman. It seems that where there are prison gates, ARS are particularly dense. Azzy, aren't you going to deal with me? I never do unnecessary things. Sister Zhu smiled. Until he walked out of Fuxing holding 2 bouquets of flowers, Fang Ye was still in a daze and kept recalling what Sister Zhu said in his mind. Her attitude was indeed neutral, and she also revealed a lot of information to herself. It turned out that the Eye of Disaster could be hidden later. So, considering the relationship between Cheng Shui and Sister Zhu, is Cheng Shui a sequencer, or is she an evil? Xiaoya, why do you suddenly want to take a look at the greenhouse? What is in the greenhouse? Cheng Shui bit her lip, but she didn't expect Sister Zhu to actually let Fang Ye follow her in. How partial. There's nothing else except flowers. I'm quite curious. Fang Ye smiled reluctantly. He did not intend to tell Qiao and the others about this matter. Although Qiao was also quite strong, he believed without hesitation that even all the members of the Mangzhong team would only face total annihilation against Sister Zhu. Oh no, see you tomorrow? Fang Ye rolled down the window and looked, seeing the girl waving her hands with a bright smile. See you tomorrow? After watching the 2 separate, Sister Zhu leaned against the door of Fuxing and lit a lady's cigarette. Come out, he's gone. A tall, slender girl with a miserable appearance and a pitiful expression emerged from the hiding place in the store. If Fang Ye could have recognized him at a glance, this girl was Chewing who ran away that night. In order to cover up your stinking smell, I even exposed my identity. Sister Zhu opened and closed her red lips and slowly exhaled a puff of smoke with an unhappy expression. A mid-war E who was a kind of goo actually dared to escape to her territory. If he hadn't seen that she would be useful in the future, he would have killed him long ago according to his previous temperament. Thank you, Sister Zhu. Chewing said gratefully. Don't thank me in a hurry. In exchange, you can do 2 things for me. Sister Zhu looked at Cheng Shui standing at the door of Fuxing, slowly picked up a cup of coffee and sipped it. I will try my best to complete it. Sister Zhu leaned over and whispered beside Chewing. What? Chewing looked trembling and looked at Sister Zhu in disbelief. Don't ask unnecessary questions, just finish what you have to do. She frowned, with a look of disgust on her face. Yes. Chewing lowered her head, turned and left Fuxing. So, which address should we go to first? Cheng Shui slid open the phone screen, stared at the 3 addresses in the memo, looked back and smiled. What do you think? Chewing hesitated and pointed to the middle. Shen Ci held a cigarette in his mouth and stood at the door of an old factory building and looked around. Hey, Panqing, what are you doing? Me? I'm just here to take a look at the place where that kid Fang Ye sensed the evil. Maybe there will be some fish that slipped through the net. Supper? Don't eat it. My belly is so big. My family is urging me to lose weight every day. Do you have beer? Shen Ci stretched out his arm and looked at the time on his watch. I'll be there in an hour. He took a deep breath of smoke, then crushed the cigarette but at his feet and looked at the flickering convenience store opposite. He put his hands in his jeans pockets and walked in. Chapter 24, Part 1. Shen Ci touched the freshly shaved stubble on his face and was filled with emotion. The factory building in front of him still had traces of the ability of the deputy team to eradicate the If it weren't for that young man Fang Ye, all the workers in the factory who were in their 40s or 50s might have died quietly, because there are too many accidents in the factory. Moreover, you can fool it by just looking for any excuse, and even if someone dies here, you won't be able to lose much money. After finding out the evil, they evacuated the workers on the grounds of high-risk work, found them each a new job. After all, it turned out that the damn factory manager also owed those workers wages for almost a year. Crunchy. Team Sean stepped on the thin industrial stairs and walked to the second floor. Damn it, why can't I find it? He turned on the flashlight and glanced around, sweating profusely, with a trace of embarrassment on his face. Because he actually didn't just come here to go around. As the deputy captain of the Wuching ferryman team, he wasn't so free yet. The biggest reason is that when we got married, the gold ring was lost here in the chaos of clearing out the evil. Oh, if we don't find it, that guy will blame me to death. Shinsei muttered. The reason why he didn't call the team members over was because everyone had their own things to do. He never regarded those children as his subordinates. Hey, why is this a factory building? Didn't Ono say that this is the address of his cousin's relative's home? Chu-Ying, who was following Cheng Shui, lowered her head and said nothing. Someone is coming? Why are you here? Shinsei squinted his eyes and hid in the corner of the second floor, watching the two people walking into the factory quietly. Little girl? After Shinsei saw their faces clearly, he was stunned for a few seconds and then shook his head. Why do little girls these days like to look for excitement? It's probably some kind of test of daring or truth or dare. Well, it seems that Xiaoya lied to me. Cheng Shui smiled slightly. Then that means the girl named Lan Yuan is not his cousin. Maybe. Chu-Ying agreed. Lan Yuan? Shinsei's pupil shrank. Isn't that the holder of the number 26 divine sequence, cause and effect, from Wu City's home team? Why does her name appear here? Then what do these three addresses Xiaoya asked me to write mean? Cheng Shui's face was full of distress. 3 addresses? That's it. Shinsei licked his dry lips, thinking a lot in his mind. Xiaofeng. Fortunately we acted quickly, otherwise your friend would have come here. What should I do if I encounter air at that time? He was about to stand up and stop Cheng Shui when a tall figure suddenly stood in front of him. Ouch, you scared me. Shinsei looked at Cheng Shui who was looking at him downstairs, and then at the girl in front of him. You have discovered me a long time ago? Of course, it's impolite to eavesdrop on other people's conversations. Cheng Shui put her hands behind her back and looked at Shinsei curiously. Oh, what you said as a little girl made me feel embarrassed even at my age. Shinsei scratched his head in embarrassment. I'll go down right away. Who knew you guys would suddenly come in? I just wanted to hide here and pee. Chu-Ying followed him down the steps expressionlessly. By the way, I just heard you say Xiaoya's name. Could it be that the person you mentioned is called Fengyi? You also know Xiaoya, uncle? Cheng Shui's face burst into a smile of surprise. You must be a relative of his distant cousin. Distant relatives, let's just say that. So it seems that this address is where you work? Shinsei nodded hurriedly. So, do your relatives also live at these other 2 addresses? That's right. Cheng Shui's smile was still on her face, but her eyes had turned cold. But we just came from these 2 addresses. There were streets and alleys and no people there. Shinsei was shocked. He was exposed so quickly? Well, please listen to me explain. There is indeed no one. But, uncle, Cheng Shui suddenly interrupted him. I just want to ask you a question. What? Can you see that door? Shinsei was greatly shocked. As he said these words, a standard saber with a cold light was already unsheathed. Cheng Shui stood there with a gentle smile. Shinsei's pupil shrank, and 2 scarlet flesh whips had already penetrated his heart. Ahem. He spat out a mouthful of blood and his eyes darkened. It turns out, both of you are heir. Cheng Shui knelt down, took away Shinsei's cell phone, and stared pitifully into the middle-aged man's bloodshot and red eyes. You guessed wrong, I am not. What? As the flesh and blood whip was pulled away, Shinsei spat out another mouthful of dark red blood. The barbs on the whip almost tore his internal organs to pieces. Sorry, I can't let Xiaoyi know that I've been here. Cheng Shui sighed, stood up and walked out of the factory, waving towards Chu-Ying standing in the shadow. Shinsei climbed forward with all his strength and struggled. There was a long trail of blood dragging under his body, and his eyes brightened after crawling 1 meter. This is my ring. He tremblingly picked up the gold ring, wiped it on his collar, and put it back on his ring finger with a satisfied look on his face. I really want to light a cigarette and take a sip of beer. Shinsei used all his strength to support his body, turned over, and put his hand on the cigarette case in his pocket. However, his vision has gradually begun to wander. It wasn't until he lost his voice that the shadow behind him disappeared. Dong dong dong. Please come in. Lan Mu's weak voice sounded. Fengyi opened the door and saw Lan Mu lying on the bed wearing black home clothes. Taro was leaning on the sofa, concentrating on playing mobile games. Fengyi took a closer look and saw that it seemed to be a pirated version of Bubble Hall. You came so slowly. Lan Yuan didn't even raise his head. How did you know I would come? After saying it, Fengyi seemed to realize that he had asked nonsense. I bought flowers on the way. Oops, It turned out to be for the two of us. It must have come as a bonus with the rose. Lan Mu's tone was sour. What rose? Fang Yi put the flower on the bedside until he saw the 99+ message on his phone. After a quick glance, the corner of his mouth twitched. You guys are really good at figuring things out. So, you are really just childhood sweethearts with no love between men and women? Taro started gossiping. What if? I'm just telling you. How can this kid fall in love? That's not what you said just now. Lan Yuan's eyes were dark. Fang Yi rubbed his eyebrows, feeling a little overwhelmed by the 3 people in front of him. So, why are you all here? Chapter 25, Part 1. Of course it's because... Oh, wait a minute. I have a call. An untimely cell phone ringtone rang. Lan Mu looked at the incoming call notification, curled his lips, and answered the call. Seeing his expression becoming serious, Lan Yuan couldn't help but ask after hanging up the phone. What's wrong? Pancheng said Captain Shun didn't come for supper and didn't answer the phone. He asked me to take him to have a look. Don't eat late-night snacks? Is this important? Fang Yi twitched his lips, wondering what the reason was. Several people in the room shook their heads at the same time. Given Captain Shun's character, it's strange that he didn't go for a late-night snack. After all, he is a heavy drinker. Taro added. Also, Pancheng said that Captain Shun's last call was that he was hanging around the address given by Xiao Fong, saying, looking for air. We divided into 3 teams and cleared them all. Where did the misfortune come from? Lan Yuan frowned. Besides, Captain Shun is not a sequencer. Lan Mu took a deep breath. Even if there is an evil, he cannot go alone. After all, he cherishes his own life. What? He's not a sequencer? Fang Yi was stunned. He suddenly remembered that when he first proposed to Shun Ci that he wanted to join the ferryman, he was rejected by him. It turns out that it is precisely because he is not a sequencer. He's a retired soldier. Okay, it's not a big deal. Maybe Captain Shun's phone is out of battery or in arrears. I'll go take a look with Pancheng now. Lan Mu stood up and stretched out. After he turned the motorcycle key in his hand and went out, Fang Yi looked at Lan Yuan and Taro. Can Lan Mu really ride on a motorcycle and use space folding? Yes, Lan Mu is perfect for traveling this kind of distance that is not too far away. The wind blowing from the subway entrance raised Chang Shui's soft long hair. Next to her, a red Simo passed by her. She stood on the descending elevator with a gentle smile on her lips. The intertwining light cast a shadow on her face. Office workers swarmed in during the evening rush hour, and the cramped space almost made it hard for her to breathe. In the crowd, a man wearing a mask squeezed Chang Shui into a corner and kept getting closer to her. His eyes were lewd, and he kept looking up and down, as if on purpose, and kept rubbing against the shaking of the subway. Go away. She raised her head, her eyes indifferent. The girl's voice was not loud, but it was enough for the man to hear. He looked around in a panic. When he found that no one had noticed the 2 of them, his eyes changed and became fierce. If you don't want to die, don't move. The man's pupils suddenly narrowed and expanded. Tick tick tick. Chang Shui stood in front of the subway door that was about to close with her back on her back. The girl chuckled mockingly and left the station without looking back. Suddenly there were exclamations and screams in the carriage. Ah, so much blood. Someone was stabbed with a knife. Is there a doctor on the subway? This world is so boring. Everything was so boring, and the intertwining of human desires made her feel sick. Every day was repetitive and boring, driving her almost crazy. Chang Shui kicked off her shoes, turned the key, and opened the bedroom door. She plunged into the soft quilt and pillow, hugged a white shirt, and breathed deeply. Fortunately, it's just you who hasn't changed. The city lights outside the window leaked into the room through the gaps in the girl's curtains, and the walls of her bedroom were densely covered with photos of different sizes. The protagonists in those photos. It was Fang Yi. Crown Plaza Hotel. Hey, why are you back so soon? You didn't go for supper with Captain Shun and Pancheng. Taro raised his eyes and saw Lan Mu pushing in the door. Looking at the pale and lost Lan Mu, Lan Yuan felt something bad in his heart. Brother, what's wrong? Lan Mu's eyes were full of confusion, and he murmured, Captain Shen is dead. What? The 2 women looked up in horror. When Fang Yi heard this, he frowned deeply. What's going on? Then why are you alone now? Where's Pancheng? Lan Yuan stood up and poured a glass of water and handed it to Lan Mu. Brother, calm down first. Lan Mu took the water tremblingly and took a sip. When Pancheng and I arrived at the factory, we saw Captain Shen lying inside. When we got closer, we found that he was no longer breathing, and his internal organs were destroyed to pieces. The few of them looked at each other and did not rush to ask. Instead, they waited quietly for Lan Mu to speak again. Pancheng was going crazy at that time and wanted to find the murderer, but I looked at Captain Shun's wounds and found that it was Air who killed him. Air? Fang Ye's eyes darkened. According to what Suen said at the time, there should be only one Air nearby. How could another one suddenly appear? It also happened to appear in the original factory. So I called Joe and the place was cordoned off. He asked me to come back first, but the heir must have escaped long ago. Lan Mu closed his eyes. In the Wuching deputy team, the closest people to Pan Cheng are Li Lu and Captain Shen. With Chao's behavior, he should directly inject Pan Cheng with sedatives. That kid. The eyes of the two women turned red. Do you have the sequence ability of hypnosis, but cannot clear your own memory? Feng Yi secretly sighed. What will happen next? We can only suppress the news of Captain Shen's death like Li Lu did, and then investigate. They can't even hold a funeral immediately before they investigate clearly. Lan Mu's eyes turned red and he grabbed Feng Ye's shoulders. Xiaofeng, can you sense the existence of that Yi? Just like you did before. Feeling a pain in his shoulder, Feng Yi frowned. That heir has already escaped. The range is too large and I can't feel it. Lan Mu sat back on the sofa dejectedly. I'm sorry, I was too excited. Are there no clues at all? Could it be that the surveillance has been destroyed again? Lan Yuan asked. Only the convenience store opposite the factory has surveillance footage of Team Shan buying cigarettes. Several people fell into silence again. Xiaofeng, you should go back first. This matter has been handed over to Qiao for investigation. There may be something you can help with by then. Good. Looking back at the three people with heavy expressions, Feng Yi pursed his lips and didn't say another word, until he returned home and locked the door. Turning around, there was Sue kneeling respectfully. How come there's E in the address you gave me before? Feng Yi poured himself a glass of water slowly. Normally, in Wuching, the number of E's and people is almost equal. Suan lowered his head. Feng Ye's hand holding the water glass paused. Then why is there only one you? Because the master who made the contract with you. Most of his followers are not in Wuching. Where?
Thanks for watching. You can find the next videos in the playlist linked in the info card or directly on my channel. And as always, if you have any feedback, feel free to share it in the comments too.